recap of the Brickyard podcast. We're here to break down every game, go over every team's performance in week 7 of the NFL. We're here to preview everything. And at the end of the show, talking about the famous worst top 5. The documents will be unleashed in this show. You'll make sure you won't want to miss that. We start with Thursday night football. The Denver Broncos got the win over the New Orleans Substitutes 33 to 10. Talking about Thursday night football and what that game was, Sean Payton's revenge game potentially. Your thoughts on the Thursday night game? Denver Broncos beating up on the lowly Saints.
I mean, my thoughts were, I guess, the same as Spencer Rattlers, and I feel like the same as most people think. Like, hey, what the hell are we out here doing, man? Like, Spencer Rattler legitimately confused in this game, not sure what exactly the Saints were doing, and I'm pretty sure most older senior citizens half asleep in their chairs that just finished reading the newspaper and doing all their crossword puzzles were also thinking when they were watching the New Orleans Saints, because this is one of those games where the Saints were playing so bad that it literally woke you up because they were playing that bad. You're like, what actually is happening right now? Because I'm seeing a team fall apart that started out the season as the highest scoring team in the NFL. How do you fall that far from grace? You still have Alvin Kamara on this team. I get Spencer Rattler's a rookie, but your defense is nowhere to be found here. And this is the same team that lost for the very first time against Justin Herbert in his career in Denver. And that Denver Broncos team just went out there and played an embarrassing game of football versus the Arizona Cardinals. And you get absolutely wrecked by them at home. And if you're the New Orleans Saints, that has to really bother you for this football team. And for the Broncos, this was a game where Sean Payton was out for revenge versus his team. His team really didn't even have to do that much. Like Bo Nix, 16 for 26, 166 yards. Like Javonte Williams carrying the ball only for 88 yards, but he gets 2 touchdowns there. They're able to take advantage of turnovers, and that defense stepped back up this week. But for the Saints, like, you just got blown out by a very mediocre team at this point. I feel like in the NFL season, like, I feel like last week the Broncos proved that they're not a dynamic force in the NFL this year. You've compared them to the New England led Mac Jones Patriots teams. This is exactly like getting blown out by Mac Jones and the Patriots. Like, you have a player that decided he had a midlife crisis. You know, he wants to come out of college, and the midlife crisis himself, Bo Nix, yeah, that's his new name now, the midlife crisis, decided he wanted to change his career and play football in the NFL. And at 40 years old, he was drafted as the oldest rookie in NFL history here. And that's where you have to really take a look and wonder, why is Dennis Allen still coaching this team? Did he have a scandal like Diddy where he's recording people in New Orleans and the ownership and general management? Does he have some dirt on the city of New Orleans, the mayor of New Orleans, or governor of Louisiana, maybe? Like, that runs that deep where you have to wonder, like, how is this guy still employed to be the head coach as the New Orleans Saints? We have questions, and I think we need answers. And it's time for some answers about Dennis Allen.
We need answers because if the Super Bowl was played for week 2, they would have won. They would have annihilated whoever was in front of them. 44 points
Destroyed.
in 2 consecutive games. And since then, they scored 12 points against the Eagles. They get they blow a lead against the Falcons and the Hall of Famer Kirk Cousins. All right, no fault there. The Chiefs, all right, cool. Tampa annihilates you, and then you lose to Denver. And I called them the New Orleans substitutes for a few reasons. For one thing, you had your backup quarterback with his backup offensive line, with his backup running backs and backup wide receivers, backup defense. Like, the whole team is falling apart, and now you have lost 5 consecutive games. Spencer Rattler, nobody thought Spencer Rattler was going to be here today. Like, we thought he was going to be benched for a whole year, sit behind Derek Carr. Derek Carr's hurt. Wide receivers, your number one receiver was Cedric Wilson. You want to talk about a man that we haven't talked about in how long? When was the last time we talked about Cedric Wilson on this show? You forgot where he was. And there's a couple other players this week that reappeared in humorous situations, and Cedric Wilson's one of those guys. Obviously, remember his time in Dallas relatively well. But since then, where in the world is Cedric Wilson? Turns out he is a third string wide receiver on the Saints, who is now their number one. Congratulations, Saints. And then for the Broncos, like they have a way to win, and if they can run for rush for 200 yards, and Bo Nix can throw no picks, and your team is run by third string wide receivers, chances are they're going to annihilate you. And I think the comparison for the Patriots, each week it just becomes more and more reaffirming because their defense, I mean, they held Alvin Kamara to 10 yards and he didn't really get anything going on the ground. So you shut down their number one option. If you can shut down Alvin Kamara, I guess the Saints just can't do anything. And even their kicker was missing field goals. I'm like, good Lord. You know what this game was really, though, for me? This was the revenge game for Will Lutz. Mr. Four field goals. Mr. Long of 52. Mr. Didn't miss an extra point. Mr. Had what, 20 points in fantasy? Good Lord. Not only do you have Sean Payton, who's out for blood, but then Will Lutz with his legs getting it done. Good Lord. Yeah, the Saints had no chance. When you have those two anomalies together, they were doomed at the start.
They were doomed, and I mean, we were talking about bub memes, and like, sounds like the name of a country song. And his name was Bub Means, and he walked
Sounds
into the
like
bar. It's like three, and then Jawan Johnson like just doesn't exist anymore. I mean, 3 catches for 18 yards. What happened to your
remember?
boy Jawan? You were hyped about him earlier this season.
I was so hyped. And then they even have Foster Moreau. Their number two was
Foster
Mason
Moreau.
Mason Tipton. These are all players that someday are going to be shown on grids because they play for the Saints, Panthers, and Bucks at one point. Maybe you'll see a cameo from them on the Dolphins someday. But like Mason Tipton, and then Bub Meme. Bub Meme sounds like a guy that Johnny Cash would fight in a saloon in a song, and he's their
That's
wide
what I'm
receiver right
saying.
now. Yeah, it's like the Saints are doomed. I mean, good lord. Even with the Bucks getting hurt, even with the Panthers being as bad as they are, I feel like the Saints are in a pretty bad spot right now. 5 consecutive losses, longest losing streak in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. That's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. They're like in a worse position than the Panthers, you could argue, because the Saints won 2 games and they could win more games this season. And you look at that and you're like, that's a problem when it comes to drafting players. And you look at the Panthers, they've lost a lot of games. And you look at the Panthers and you're like, wow, this team will probably lose a lot more games this season. So draft wise, they're in a better position than you, and you're a team that needs to rebuild that can't get out of your own cap. Like
Every year. Hey, it's okay.
as
Just
Bill
push it off
Belichick
to the
said,
next year.
as Belichick said, they just keep pushing that $88 million off, hoping it's gonna go away.
It's not going away anytime soon. Good news for them is that in the draft, when they are the ninth overall pick, they can take a really nice offensive tackle, which is probably who they'll take with that offensive line falling apart. So good for
Yeah,
the Saints. But yeah, as far as the Broncos, I mean, Javante Williams coming out of the woodworks. Bo Nix, I'll give Bo Nix some credit. I've compared him to Mac Jones, but he can definitely run. He's mobile. That's cool. He just doesn't like throw passing touchdowns is all. That's his only gripe.
yeah. He's
But
the
he's
Mac
a
Jones
seasoned
of
veteran.
Zach Wilson's.
He's the Zach Wilsons of Andy Dalton's at this point.
Oh yeah,
just just ancient fossilized man, but hey, in 30 years when he's 86, maybe he'll go to the Hall of Fame. Who knows?
yeah. You know who is back in full force on their way to the Hall of Fame? The Jaguars, if they played in London. We
Yeah.
saw it last week. They kind of fell apart. Bears whooped that ass in London, and Cole Kmet did his thing. We saw a Keenan Allen sighting. Caleb Williams and the Bears broke out, and now in this game, I was like, oh, the Patriots are like up in this game. 2 possessions in the first quarter. That's interesting. And then suddenly you look over and we have a punt return for a touchdown, and then Tank Bigsby. We talked about how Travis Etienne kind of being out of the fold could be good for this team. Like, this is what we wanted from Tanks Bisbee, and this is exactly that energy infusion that could help stabilize a season for the Jacksonville Jaguars, where it seems like they came into the season without a lot of wide receiver help, and that was my biggest concern with this team is they're not dynamic on defense. Their run game is so-so, and your receivers are definitely below average compared to the rest of the league right now, but if you can consistently get this type of production from Tank Bigsby and your special teams is going to start to step up for you now and make some big plays, like, okay, now you may not be a playoff team, but you're at least not a laughing stock anymore. And Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he only missed 5 throws, 193 yards isn't that impressive and a touchdown, but at least he didn't turn the ball over. They really didn't need him to go off, so it's one of those games where the situation didn't call on him to step up. And the Patriots now look at themselves in a very awkward position where they're going forward with Drake May, but it seems like their team has already quit on their head coach, because when Jacoby Brissett was the starter, there's already articles coming out about a potential mutiny in the locker room now. And now, post Bill Belichick, it's going to decide this season if Gerard Mayo is the head coach at the end of this season. We'll have to take a look and see if Robert Kraft is going to go down the Jerry Jones route, or is he going to go down the route of someone else who was able to rebound and have success with a new regime here and a new head coach. Because it's kind of concerning if the Patriots go like 3-14 or some record where they're towards the bottom of the league and they just decide to bring back Gerard Mayo.
Yeah, I'm worried about that because after the way they hired Gerard Mayo, just like, nope, that's the guy after Bill, that's it. Even though you had the Mike Vrabels and the Bobby Slowicks, and there was plenty of college head coaches that could have definitely had a new face in New England, but instead you go with a guy who was a part of that same regime, and then calling your players soft after this game, like, let's be honest, like Patriots defense looks a lot worse this year. There's no doubt about it, but like these are the same players from last year. It's not like there's a lot of turnover from them. Really, their only big addition was Antonio Gibson and Jamichael Hasty. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same team. And yeah, I understand this team isn't very talented in most parts of the field, but at the same time, this team hasn't changed much since Bill, and they were definitely a tough team last year, albeit not a very good team, but definitely played tough. And I feel really bad for Drake May because I've seen him play and he's looked pretty good. I mean, if you give him some weapons and God forbid an offensive line, like I think you could be pretty good in this league. But unfortunately, the Patriots decided to not overpay for Calvin Ridley. Okay. Brandon Ayuk said, fuck New England. I'm not going to New England. And then after that, you're like, okay, we can fill our gaping hole at wide receiver with KJ Osborne, and we can draft two whiff wide receivers with Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. Patriots cannot draft wide
What's new?
receivers to save their life.
What's new? Like, you
What's
can't
new?
draft wide receivers. That's why you have to overpay for them.
That's why you got to pay for Calvin Ridley's. Calvin Ridley's jumping off the screen in Tennessee? No. But would he jump off the screen in the Patriots? Better than KJ Osborne. And who else do they have? Who led the? I mean, you have Hunter Henry, who is pretty much your offense, pretty much at this point, and then whatever Ramondre Stevenson can do, I guess. But Demario Douglas didn't do very much. Kendrick Bourne, who was a fifth string on the 49ers. Keyshawn Butte, like they can't do anything offensively, and I feel bad for Drake May. Hopefully, if they're smart, which the Patriots over the last 6 years have not been very smart, but if they can be smart, get an offensive-minded head coach, get wide receivers, get like I don't know, 3 or 4 of them because all of them that they have suck. Maybe you
5.
keep Hunter Henry. Maybe then there's hope, but that's going to be a long time, and I don't have any faith that the Patriots will turn it around.
Do you think Robert Kraft is gonna go down the Jerry Jones route, and then it's just gonna kind of be like he sells tickets, he had his success with Belichick, like what more does Robert Kraft have to prove? Is it going to go down a similar route where Jerry Jones just sticks with Jason Garrett for far too long? God bless his soul. On NBC, there, he's doing a good job. And then also Mike McCarthy, who shouldn't be there right now.
I think he'll probably fire him, especially if the team turns on him. But also keep in mind, Robert Kraft is older than Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones, we'll talk about him because they didn't win the bye week. They found a way to lose. We'll talk about them later. But I mean, what does he need to do? At the end of the day, it's probably going to be his sons that end up taking over this mess. And what I mean, what is it? What do they need to do at this point? They have a gaping hole pretty much everywhere across the field, except for maybe corner with Christian Gonzalez. But they're a mess at this point, and I think they're not gonna. I feel like they're gonna fire Gerard Mayo, but then replace him with another Patriots way head coach, whether it's a Bill O'Brien or somebody from their former team. Maybe we get a Devin McCourty at head coach or something, but just go a
Yeah.
different route. It's been Bill Belichick, like the team has not been good since Brady left. It's been 5 years now, okay? You tried with Cam Newton, it failed. Okay, whatever. Mac Jones, you gave it a try, it failed. Drake May looks like he could actually be good. Give him a wide receiver or three, give him a tight end, give him a running back, and maybe then he'll be pretty good. But till then, he's in no man's land. I just hope he doesn't end up like a Bryce Young, although I do think he's played better to this point.
Yeah. Thoughts on Jags? Just like you beat up on a bad team here who's kind of quit on their coach.
No, I mean, I'll give him some credit. I really like their rookie wide receiver, Brian Thomas. He's been good. Tank Bigsby. I mean, when he got drafted, I'm like, how does a guy named Tank not ball at running
Who
back? And
plays
last year, he
running
really
back?
let me
Yeah.
down. And he balled. I mean, he played pretty well for them. 118 yards, 2 touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence didn't need to do too much, but I can't make fun of the Jag. When you play a bad team and you punch down, you beat them. Good. You came back. I was really worried this was going to be a close game, but the Jags took care of business. So you know what, Jags, you'll be off the worst top five this week.
Yeah, and they also like looking back at the Texans games, like okay, maybe that was something when they were like pretty competitive with them.
Yeah, I mean they lost to the Browns, and
That was
you know,
early.
yeah,
That was
but they beat
early.
the Colts and certain teams they just don't match up well with, and maybe I mean the next couple of weeks could be tough for them, but if they can come out and win a game like against the Eagles, which will come up a couple of weeks from now, then okay, they're not going to make the playoffs at this point. You started off 0 and 4, 1 and 5, so you're kind of screwed. But if you can at
Yeah,
least finish the season with pride, then maybe Doug Peterson keeps his job.
yeah, that Eagles game that you point out, like that is a very good test to see actually see how good the Jaguars are. Because like if you come out there and you like beat the Eagles, then you're onto something. Because the Eagles, they've been pretty good this season, and they went out there, they won 28-3, and this was the first game where you really started to see the Giants defense break along with the offense because the offense has been terrible all season. People started out the season like enthusiastic about Daniel Jones, like, wow, he hasn't sucked in September. That's exciting, right? I'm like, well, we've had quarterbacks play well in September. It matters what happens when you start to play week 6. That's when teams really show up and are playing to the caliber that they're pretty much going to be at for the rest of the season here. They're still going to get better, but how do you play after week 6? How do you play in week 7? And the answer is you're going to get benched here. And this was Saquon Barkley's revenge game versus the Giants. He took this game personally. This was his Michael Jordan moment where that was the team. Like, I'm almost going to break the rushing record versus a player coming back against his former team. I believe he had the second most of all time, and I think he's going to say that and be like, I can hit the full 190 next time. Jalen Hurts didn't need to do anything in this game, and they just cruised to a 28-3 lead. And the Philadelphia Eagles too have been broken for part of the season. You went there, you're in a dogfight versus the Cleveland Browns. It was ugly. Nick Sirianni's getting into fights with fans. The just vibe of this team isn't good, but Saquon Barkley turned into a superhero for one game, and he took it personally here in the Giants. Daniel Jones has the audacity to say, like, I was upset by being benched. Like, wow, I was I'm bad at cleaning and I'm upset I can't get a job as a janitor. I'm bad at cooking and I burn an overcooked steak every time I make it and I can't get hired as a line cook. I drop stuff all the time and I'm clumsy and I can't be a food runner at a restaurant. I have terrible strokes in golf and I'm not invited to the PGA. I throw a gutter ball every time I bowl and I can't get in a pro bowling league. Like I can't. I'm blind, but I want to drive a car. Like, what are you talking about? You're upset you got benched. You suck. You haven't thrown a touchdown at home since January of 2023. Like, it's been a long time. Like, since you've thrown a touchdown, man. Like,
You
you
want to hear a
have not
crazy
been
stat?
good over the past few weeks, and you're upset. You're
You
upset.
want
You're the one who's mad.
You want to hear a crazy stat that I heard? Um, since he last threw a touchdown, there has been 20 quarterbacks in the NFL who have thrown a touchdown at MetLife, in which case Daniel Jones has not. That includes names like Desmond Ritter. That includes names like Bo Nix. That includes names like Mac Jones, who haven't really played since how long? I don't even know when the last time Mac Jones played. The list goes on. But then there are 16 hockey players who have scored since Daniel Jones has scored a touchdown. They have more points on the board, hockey players do, than Daniel Jones at MetLife since the last time he threw a touchdown.
Oh, do
Isn't
they
that
do
absurd? The Winter
Frozen
Classic.
the Winter Classic? They do that in MetLife, and there's been more
Yeah.
hockey points than Daniel Jones touchdowns. That
Yes.
is
That to me is
crazy.
that's all you need to know. Also, keep in mind this man has not scored a passing touchdown since the Seahawks game. That was 3 weeks ago. It's been a long time since he's even thrown a passing touchdown this year. And then for the Giants, like I can't wait to just go up and down and just wreck them a couple of segments from now. But you have Saquon Barkley, who was okay with being a lifer in New York and like staying with them, and they just constantly tagged him. They tagged him twice, and then when it comes time to actually pay him, they're like, "Well, we would, but we paid Daniel Jones $140 million for some reason, which is one of the worst contracts in the league." Unfortunately, Cleveland said, "Hold my beer." And then, other than that, you have Malik Neighbors come back. He can't get anything done because it turns out you need the quarterback to throw it to him, and unfortunately, they're throwing it in the stands. Drew Lock somehow came in and was arguably worse than Daniel Jones, if that's even possible. And then the running game gets shut down, and then you're facing off against your former teammate who by no means did you any dirty. If anything, you did him dirty, and he should be taking offense like he did, and you just get absolutely belly whipped by your rival in the Eagles. You get absolutely embarrassed. I'm going to look at the stats because I don't think they scored. They had 119 yards of offense in the entire game. That's pathetic, dude. What is wrong with this Giants team? And I believed in like their defense played well against the Bengals, and that's a good unit there for the most part. But I just feel like when your offense sucks long enough, eventually the defense gives out because it's like, what's the point? And 119 yards of offense,
Yeah.
like, good lord, 2 yards of play. Oh my god, man! Just I
Wait,
could
Daniel
go on
Jones
for
had
hours.
over 20 passes for under 100 yards. Like you had
Screens.
14 completions for 99 yards. Like you're offended you got benched? In what world do you have the right to be offended by that? It's like if you got an F on the test but you're offended you don't pass the class. Help me out here.
Yeah,
It's like if you're
it'll,
scared of alligators and you can't be
you're
an
in a swamp.
alligator wrestler.
Yeah, the list goes on. I could think of a couple off the top of my head, but you mentioned the baker one, not knowing how to cook but trying to get into a bake off. Good luck with
Yeah.
that. Trying to be a car mechanic but you've never touched the car before. Like, dog. You guys had 43 passing yards total as a team because you got sacked 8 times. Not even your offensive line can hold you up anymore. Yeah, Daniel Jones. Like, when do you just call your losses with the Daniel Jones experiment? It's been a massive failure. It was a failure 3 years ago, and then you re-signed him, even though he threw 15 touchdowns 1 year. You're like, this guy needs $40 million, and then
Yeah.
now here you are. Now everything that you've done, it's like you shoot yourself in the foot, and instead of giving yourself a band-aid, you shoot yourself in the other foot. And you're like, ow, both of my feet hurt. I should shoot my kneecaps now. That'll solve it. And it just keeps going on until they just have their own self-inflicted wounds and they die on the street corner.
Yeah.
Their solution to
No,
shooting themselves in the foot is just blowing their entire foot off.
it's crazy. You know, a team who like could get off a contract, and this trade could help both of these teams. But I think if you are the Cardinals and your season isn't going your
Oh.
way, and you know you can't win a Super Bowl with Kyler, let's swap Kyler for Daniel Jones because Daniel Jones contract you can get off of it. Then the Cardinals can suck. Draft Shador Sanders. He can play with Marvin Harrison Jr. And then Kyler will play out his time in New York. Maybe be a little bit better than Daniel Jones. Sell some tickets. Like Brian Daboll can work with Kyler Murray for sure. They really don't have that strong of an offensive minded presence in Arizona, and then the Cardinals get to suck and draft their quarterback, and then they also get off of Kyler's deal, and then they can get rid of Daniel Jones very easily.
I think that's a good idea. Should we talk about the Cardinals and Chargers game while we're at it?
Yeah, they
Let's.
played. It was
They played
exactly what I
football.
thought it would be.
I knew this game was going to be awful because first of all, the Chargers defense has been good all year. They've allowed the least amount of points in the entire league. But like these two quarterbacks for me, and I'm not going to say anything too badly about Justin Herbert because he played a good game, but Kyler Murray, he is an enigma to me because you look at his stats and you're like, oh, that's pretty good. And you see the eye test, you're like, okay, he can move, and he's got a big arm, he can be accurate. Like everything checks out with Kyler Murray. But I feel like now we're seeing Kyler Murray as the Jay Cutler of our generation, where he's got the talent and he's totally capable any given Sunday to drop 50 points, but he also just doesn't care enough about football because he could have been a baseball player for the Athletics. He was drafted in the first round. He just doesn't care enough at this point. So you're just going to keep having these games where he just kind of meanders his way through the game. He'll throw a touchdown or two. If we're losing, it's like, oh, well, I guess I'll go home and play Fortnite. Whatever, no big deal. And that's just how it's going to be. And I feel like Marvin Harrison did not have a great game, but Marvin Harrison is better than how he's been in Arizona to this point. And the Cardinals, they're paying Kyler Murray how much? $50 million to be their quarterback, and they were 2-5. And it's great that they could beat the Chargers, who beat themselves continuously, and we'll talk about them later. But the Kyler, I'm happy that he won this game, but good God, the Cardinals are easily the most frustrating team to watch because I see a really good tight end. You have James Conner, who has been really good for them since he joined Arizona. You have Marvin Harrison, who's like the best wide receiver prospect since maybe Jamar Chase. You have the offensive line. You've addressed your offensive line. I understand your defense isn't great, but each week you score 14 points. You have one of the worst offenses. Make it make sense. Kyler Murray was a Pro Bowler at one point. Am I missing something? Are we talking about Jay Cutler here?
Yeah, I said this 2 years ago on this show, and I was called crazy on this show. I compared him to Jay Cutler, and I was like, oh my god, no. Kyler Murray's an MVP caliber candidate. It's completely crazy then. Now it plays out over the past few years. Like, this is something that just needed time to breathe. It was a take I made 3 years ago about Kyler Murray. I compared him. I said he was an athletic Jay Cutler, who's slightly shorter here, get killed for it, and then a couple years later, everyone's talking about how he's overpaid and can't win a Super Bowl. Wow, crazy how that works. It's almost like I had one of these from the future, and it was about Kyler Murray. It's like, nope, I don't think this guy cares about football that much. I think he just wants to get paid, have his good season, close to being a Pro Bowl player, MVP caliber, lead his team to the playoffs, and then gets absolutely demolished. How is that Cliff Kingsbury firing looking right now when you're seeing him run one of the best offenses in football in Washington with a rookie quarterback? And they just went out there, and albeit against the Panthers, but they kicked, for what it's worth, they kicked the Panthers' ass better than anyone else who's kicked the Panthers' ass this season. Now you're looking at, okay, Cliff Kingsbury's running the offense for that team. Kyler Murray was the one to tell him to calm down, and this guy can't even see over his own offensive line. Like, if he's not running for a 44-yard touchdown, like, okay, like, what are we doing here? Like, the year he was really good was all Cliff Kingsbury's offense. When you had D Hop at the end of his prime, you had, you know, a really good running back combination in Chase Edmonds and James Conner. Not the best in the league, but they were solid. AJ Green gave you some good time while he was there, and then you still had another solid number two at wide receiver there. And then
And what
that
has happened since?
kind of all just fell apart, and you paid Kyler. Like, Kyler's not a quarterback you can pay top tier money and have a team good enough to be competitive, because he can't
No.
make up for blemishes like Mahomes, like Lamar can, like Josh Allen can. And Arizona's just not that well run to begin with, where they're not a team like Baltimore, like Pittsburgh, who can just constantly draft elite talent and be relevant all the time. Like, we don't know how they can do it. So you need either a coach or a quarterback who can overcome that and be transcendent. Your coach is not transcendent, and your quarterback is not transcendent, and you paid him way too much money.
Yeah, the Cardinals are just kind of stuck in the mud. And frustratingly enough, you compare them to like the Ravens and the Steelers. The Cardinals are good for one season every decade, and then they rip the hearts out of their fans. But that's not nearly as bad as what the Chargers do on a weekly basis, it feels like. Because the Chargers, like, you look at the numbers, right? They owned time of possession, they had more first downs, they had more yards. Justin Herbert threw for 350 yards,
No touchdowns
and
though.
they lost. They scored 15 points. Will Disley was their number one wide receiver. Vlad McConkey got shut down in this game. The running game was nowhere to be found. It's like the Chargers. This is another team. We've talked about the Chargers many times. I'm like, just Jim Harbaugh instilling new blood. But this team, every single week, just finds new ways to break the hearts of their fans. And it's just, in this game, they should have won this game, I think. On paper, they were playing better. But ultimately, they just find ways to disappoint. And even with Jim Harbaugh, they still found a way to crumble this game away. And Justin Herbert's one of those guys. I look at his numbers. I'm like, yeah, numbers are great. I look at him. I see the eye test. I'm like, yeah, he's good too. Are the Chargers ever going to make it to this, you know, supremacy that they have Justin Herbert as? Because he has this good game, and yet they muster 15 points. I know there's a lot of drops in this game, but good God, Chargers just always find a way to break the hearts of their fans.
Yeah, I know. It's hard being right about all these quarterbacks from a few years ago, but like Justin Herbert, like he has the talent. It's just like there's something about it where I'm just like, I don't know. Like I really just don't know, and I think it's not really that fair to him. And I really do think it's a Matthew Stafford situation where Stafford put up good numbers for some years, but some people with Stafford's like, I don't know. He's just like if he had, it's like he was a Matthew Stafford without the comebacks because even in Detroit, he would still have some stellar comebacks. And I think that's something he'll learn throughout his career. But I really do think that this is a just a core franchise level issue with the Chargers. Like, it's really hard when you don't have fans. And it's like, I'm not saying that to be mean, but you legitimately don't have fans. You don't have a home field advantage, and that just has to have a bad vibe in the locker room, especially when you're going out there and when you're at home. Most of the people are cheering for the other team. Like, is that really good for you? Like, being in LA, like, really wasn't the right decision. And Jim Harbaugh looks so old on the sideline. I hate to say it, but like I saw him when he left. I don't really like follow college football like that. And then when he came back this season, like wow, this guy is pretty old on the sideline. This team I think is definitely better, but I don't like the receivers on this team, and I really don't like the weapons to this point this season. And I don't think Herbert is someone who's going to take a team like Mahomes and what Josh Allen was doing earlier this season and make them that team where they're still going to be in it and competitive every game because we haven't really seen him do yet, and he's had plenty of time to prove it. But if you give him like a 49ers team and a Kyle Shanahan head coach, where if the Chargers are like, okay, Herbert not working out, Brock Purdy, we're not going to pay him. How about we, find another quarterback, restart here, and then Herbert goes to a team like the 49ers, similar to the way Stafford did with the Rams, then I think it could work for sure for him. And I think he's capable of winning a Super Bowl. Like, I mean, Matt Ryan was the MVP one year, and he was never in that class with Ben, Breeze, Peyton, and Brady. He was for like a year, but the rest of his career is like make the playoffs, conference championship, but was kind of disappointing sometimes.
Yeah, he's a top 10 quarterback, but he's lower in the top 10. That he's not in the top 5 conversation. Like you have to have Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, and then whoever's the flavor of the week at 5, but for the most part, it's frustrating for me cuz I am a Herbert fan, but this team, the Chargers, I just don't think they're ever going to get him over the top. Imagine if you had a team like the 2000s Chargers, where you had the Antonio Gates and the LTs of the world. That team maybe does a little better, but I just think the Chargers as a whole, there's certain teams in sports, whether it's the Clippers, whether it's the Mets, the list goes on. The Cubs for the longest time, they're just cursed, and everything just seems to go wrong. The Red Sox for 86 years were a cursed franchise. Curses are real. Should they have ever left San Diego? No. Should they have formed and have a co stadium with the Rams? No. but they just continuously shoot themselves in the foot. And it's sad to see because there are plenty of Chargers fans that I know who just are devastated each week because of their team.
That makes no sense to me. Who thought that was a good idea to form a coast stadium? Like, we've seen the Clippers and the Lakers for how long now compete in the same
50 years.
stadium? Yeah,
Yeah, like 50
and
years.
now we're looking at that and we're like, yeah, no, it's a good idea to be in the same team. Like, both those teams are making a gamble knowing like whoever has success first is going to have the fans here, but like it's LA. No, most people from LA are not from LA. People are Lakers fans just because of the legacy, and people are Dodgers fans because it has that aura. They're iconic in pop culture, but the Rams and the Chargers are not iconic in pop culture. Like, I feel like the Raiders, if they went to LA, that's where you're talking. But either the Chargers or the Rams should have gone to Vegas, not the Raiders. I think the Raiders are the team that should have gone to LA, and they would have had more fans. Because now they're in Vegas, they're a California team, and why put the Rams when they're from St. Louis? Like, move them to Vegas. Okay, at least that's closer to St. Louis, and then the Rams, and then the Raiders go to LA, where they're iconic in pop culture no matter how bad they are. You have people like Ice Cube who support them, and people in California who support them. And then you have the Niners at the top, you have the Raiders, and like, okay, the Chargers, wherever you want to put them. Maybe you open up a new team. Maybe you move them to like Austin, or you move them to San Antonio, somewhere else.
Yeah, get them somewhere else because I think you're right there. Chargers were perfectly fine in San Diego. Rams, I don't even know why they went to LA, but good for them, I guess. They've been successful there, I suppose. But Raiders fans, they're gonna exist no matter what. And putting them in Vegas, in a desert, and whatever the fuck you want to call Vegas as a city, made no sense. But that game was an eyesore. The funniest part about that game is that game was on at the same time as one of the best games of the week, which was the Ravens and Bucks game. And you look at the game, like it looks a lot closer than it is, 41-31. But this was the Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson victory lap. Lamar Jackson now had his seventh game where he had as many or less incompletions as touchdowns. He also had his sixth five touchdown, no interception game. The only person who has more, who is actively playing, is Patrick Mahomes. And yeah, I mean, 17 and 22, five touchdowns, 300 yards roughly, almost nearly perfect game. And then King Derrick, 170 yards. Rashad Bateman stepped up, Justice Hill stepped up, Mark Andrews came out of the shadows, and they just absolutely wagging the Bucks. I know the Bucks. You see the score; they came back in the fourth quarter to some extent, but this is just a Ravens team that, if there's any team that's going to take down the Chiefs in the AFC, I feel like it's got to be the Ravens with Derrick Henry and Lamar. That tandem is just lethal amongst everything else.
If it's not this year, like, when is it gonna be for the Raiders or for the Ravens here? And we have Lamar in this game throwing for 5 touchdowns, looking absolutely elite there, finding his receivers, and a lot of these were good in rhythm passes, like especially that touchdown to Andrews. He like perfectly led him in the end zone there, where you can see defenders were still in front of him, and he just put the ball where it needed to be. Andrews went and got it. But when you're Daniel Jones and you're like, why did you bench me? Well, here's the thing. You had 21 pass attempts and you only got 99 yards. Derrick Henry had 15 rushing attempts and had 170 yards, almost doubling what you would have thrown for. Like, that's why you're benched. Like, Henry outran some quarterbacks this week. I don't know if that's an indictment on where some quarterbacks are in the NFL or just how great Derrick Henry is. And like, most of it was that 81-yard long rush, but that was still a hell of a rush for a guy in his 30s at this point. And Derrick Henry, talking about, I compared him and I said he was the LeBron of the NFL last week. What comes out this week? An interview with Derrick Henry, how he's talking about how he was inspired by LeBron. And he's like, if LeBron can make that sacrifice and spend that money on my body, so can I. Crazy how that works. I know, right? Just as I'm talking about him being the LeBron of the NFL, he goes out, does this, and him and Lamar are the best duo in the NFL, and people are talking about Lamar. We can talk about everything with him and how much of a great game. MVP statement. A lot of people have talked about that, but people need to realize that Rashad Bateman stepping up for this team and really being that dynamic number two with Mark Andrews kind of just a little older at this point, need to shake off the rust. I knew he would be fine coming into the season. A lot of people are like, oh my God, he's playing left tackle. Like, Mark Andrews will be fine, especially when it comes to the playoffs. And he's a good blocking tight end, which is good enough on his own. And then you have Likely, who's kind of now your fourth option, but Rashad Bateman being your big play downfield guy. And now you're using Zay Flowers out of the backfield, and he's also an explosive receiver. Like, this team is built perfectly when you have three tight ends getting involved right now, where they have number 88. I'm blanking on his name right now. And then you also have Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers as a dynamic duo right now. Because, like, how can you not put everyone in the box right now when you're trying to stop Lamar and Derrick Henry? So, like, him and Zay Flowers are going to have a lot of opportunities, and that is currently showing because his game is being elevated, and so is Zay Flowers, and he's in year two. Like, he's still a young wide receiver, and both of these receivers are still getting better. Dealt with injury issues on Bateman's side, but this is the first year where he's fully been integrated into the offense, and he looks like a really good number two coming into the season. I think that's what the Ravens have been missing, along with Derrick Henry stepping up here and being that running back besides Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, it's put a lot of pressure off of Lamar. I feel like now when you watch Lamar play, yeah, he did have 50 rushing yards and he still is able to move, but I feel like now when you watch him play, he's looking downfield more than ever. Where I felt like
Yeah.
before Derrick Henry was there, he was always looking for how can I get some extra yards? How can I wiggle through defenders? It felt like he had a run first mentality, especially when he first started, maybe moving away from it a little bit last year. But now that he has Derrick Henry, where he knows, like, I don't have to be the rushing attack, I don't need it because I don't have to rely on J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill. I have Derrick Henry, who, by the way, since 2019, Derrick Henry has 9,600 rushing yards, which is first in the league. You want to know who's
Since
second in the league?
2019, that's 5 years ago. That's insane.
You know who has the second most rushing yards since 2019? Derrick Henry after contact with 7,000. Isn't that insane? He has the most rushing yards by over 3,000. And then the next guy after him is Derrick Henry after contact. This man is not human. Derrick Henry was made in a lab, just like Lamar Jackson. We have two lab made athletes who are playing at the same time on the same team. Is absolutely
Yeah.
insane. I could talk my praises all day with these guys.
No, with Lamar too, like he just looks like he's in the flow right now. Where it felt like last season, didn't it feel like he felt like the vibe was Lamar felt the pressure to be the offense this year? Where now it's like it doesn't feel like Lamar is feeling all of that pressure. It felt like kind of the weight of the world was on Lamar Jackson's shoulders, and now he's playing in the flow. This is the like most carefree we've seen Lamar Jackson, and he's not turning the ball over, trying to do too much. Where we talk about like last season, Josh Allen seemed like he was trying to do too much, and he has also gotten better this season. Where it seems like these guys were still pretty young, like year 4 and 5, and now it seems like they've fully gone into that veteran, confident, slow, where they both have something to prove this year, and they're vying for still the number two quarterback spot. And right now, after that game, like I said, I'd take Lamar Jackson at two earlier this season, and I still will take Lamar Jackson at number two because he's accomplished more than any other quarterback currently playing outside of Matthew Stafford, who won a Super Bowl. But Lamar, I feel like individually has already done more and changed the game more than Matthew Stafford.
I feel like at this point he's the Peyton Manning to Mahomes' Brady, where he's had a lot of regular season success. He's won just as much as he has in the regular season. He's won the accolades, and now he just needs the Super Bowl, which I think this is the year that he could get it potentially, especially with the Chiefs being banged up. So
Yeah.
if he wins a Super Bowl, he's already going to go down as one of the best of all time and absolutely the best running quarterback of all time. He wins a Super Bowl, it's like, okay, we can start having a real conversation now. He'll be submitted at two, and then if he wins a few more, who knows? Maybe there actually will be a debate eventually, but I think
He could
he's just transcendent at this point.
Yeah, he could do the funny thing and do the same thing Peyton Manning did too with the comparison and win his first Super Bowl against the Bears.
He could. That could be fun.
Yeah, but
honestly.
we had the Bucks in this game too. They started out 10-0, and then Chris Godwin goes down in this game, out for the season. It's a contract year. May have been the last time we see him as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, which is tough,
Mm.
especially with the history and everything he's meant to that organization in that city here. And then Mike Evans drops a touchdown, gets banged up, and it seems like from that point, that's where the Ravens kind of took off here. We saw a close up of Baker Mayfield on a sideline, popping a zinner. It was that kind of game for him. He needed a upper. He
Hey,
probably had a quadruple decker in there if he was Baker Mayfield.
you need it from time to time. It sucks because
Yeah.
like I feel like with this game, you lose two of your top receivers, and I just felt like you go into that game, you're up 10-0, and you're at the peak of your powers, right? You're 5-2, and then or 4-3 or 4-2, I mean, and then you lose both your receivers, and then you look at the rest of the schedule. Like you face the Falcons next week, maybe you can even up with them potentially, but then you face the Chiefs and the Niners. It's like I don't want to say this is a season ender because that division's going to be competitive, but that's a huge loss for them, and you're gonna need players like Sterling Shepard and Cade Otton to step up, or Rashad White, Bucky Irving, Trey Palmer. Like you're gonna need these guys to step up because those are two massive, massive, massive losses for that offense. I hope they can get out of the gutter there.
Yeah, I think it'll be tough. But, the Falcons had a tough game versus Seattle. And you have to look at this game in context. I believe you picked the Seahawks to win this game. And you picked them because of desperation. And it seemed like the Falcons were pretty comfortable with where they were at this point. Felt like they had proven what they wanted to prove. And the Seattle Seahawks needed to get back on the wagon. They are just looking at injury after injury after injury pile up for the San Francisco 49ers. Crazy how that works. We called that on the show this season. Weird. It's kind of like we have the documents. But then the Seattle Seahawks go out there and they played like a team who was desperate for a win here. You had the extra time to prepare for this game as well. Are you worried about the Falcons after this loss, or do you think they just ran into a very hungry Seattle Seahawks team who's desperate for a win?
I think this is more about the Seahawks. The Seahawks, they're in the driver's seat with that division. The Rams are banged up. The Cardinals clearly just aren't the team this year. And then the 49ers are falling apart. The Seahawks, like, they can't lose this game, especially with the 49ers still finding ways to win to some extent. Like, I think the Seahawks were just hungry. They're a good enough team that when they play at full strength and they play hungry enough, they're going to play good football. And they did. So I'm not super worried about the Falcons. Bijan had a good game. Kyle Pitts has played well for them. Darnell Mooney, like I'm not worried about the Falcons. I think they'll be fine. I think the Seahawks were just in a much more starving place, losing three straight. They break that skid, they get back on track. So I'm not too worried about it.
Yeah, I think like if you're the Falcons, like sometimes you just have a bad game, and that's okay in the NFL because like you played a lot of tough games. You played versus the Panthers, and you get two back-to-back divisional wins. So it's like the Seahawks, they're like, okay, this team wants it more. They need it more in this game, and the Falcons, like it happens in the NFL, especially for a team in their caliber, where I don't believe that the Falcons are a juggernaut or like a Super Bowl contender by any team. But do I think they can win a playoff game? Sure, depending on who they match up with, definitely. But would I be shocked if they are a first round exit? But still won their division because it's pretty weak and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have injuries? Like, no. So, like, this is fine if you're the Falcons. So, I wouldn't panic there. This isn't, oh my God, what's going on? Are they going to lose the division here? So, really, not much to go, but credit to the Seahawks. DK did go down, so this is kind of like you get a big win, and then DK Metcalf gets injured in this game, which is tough. But let's see who steps up for the Seattle Seahawks because that's always interesting when the best player goes down. Not that it's a good thing, but it really shows you like, okay, how good is Jackson Smith and Jigba? Does Tyler
Mhm.
Lockett still have it? And can we switch up the game plan and get a run game going to take the pressure off Geno Smith? So interested to see how the Seahawks pivot as he works through his injury.
Yeah, good time to see what they have for depth. I think for the Falcons, they're going to have a much easier slate. They face the Bucks next week, who are coming off those two massive injuries we talked about. Then they have the Cowboys, who are a mess. We'll talk about them and how they did against the bye week. And then the Saints. So they're facing three teams that are either in disarray or are completely broken for the next 3 weeks. I think they should be able to win those three games. perfectly fine.
Yeah. But if the Bucks come out and fight and the Falcons back down, I'll be a little bit concerned about that.
For sure. Seahawks, I would check on, I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba should have an increased role. I'd also take a look at Jake Bobo, see what he can do as he elevates his depth on the chart as well
Yeah.
for the Seahawks. And the defense, I think the defense is also going to be very important for them stepping up. Julian Love had a pick in this game, so I think the Seahawks should be fine without DK, but this will be a real test.
Yeah, and I
Um,
don't mean to make this where the Brickyard was right show, but I mean the list just keeps going. Remember when we said the Texans and Packers was going to be the best game of the week, and it was going to come down to who had the ball last? Well, maybe it wasn't the best game of the week because the Vikings and the Lions did play each other, but it did come down to who had the ball last in this game. You had the Texans, I had the home team, and I thought whoever was at home was going to win this game, and Jordan Love. God, is he more Favre than Aaron Rodgers, but it is entertaining as hell. And it's one of those situations where I know Jordan Love now, we can expect two, maybe even three interceptions from him, but we know he's going to come right back down and score the ball. And then, at the end of the game, I'm not really worried that he's going to turn it over. And didn't you just have the feeling with this Packers team that Jordan Love was just going to march down there and get the field goal? Like, there was not a doubt in my mind that they were winning that game as soon as they had the ball last. Because we said whoever gets the ball last is going to win the game.
I know. I was looking at my pearls for a minute. I'm like, haha, I'm going to be right on this one because the Texans scored. I'm like, yes, hell yeah. Texans won this game. Silly Marcus. And then they marched down the field with 100 seconds left. They win the game. Brandon McManus gets the win. I'm like, all right, it is what it is. We were right about this game. I mean, both games were great. CJ Stroud didn't have the greatest of games, but Jordan Love, you want to talk about a guy who just slings it day in and day out. This is a guy we forget missed 2 games and leads the league in touchdowns at one point. Also has 8 interceptions, has more interceptions than Will Levis. So you just the Packers, they're fun to watch because you just see him make these crazy throws, and he most of the time succeeds in those. Josh Jacobs had a good game. Romeo Dobbs, he had a good game. That team's just a wagon. This is a game where if this ends up being a Super Bowl matchup, I'd be ecstatic because both teams win in my book in this game. I think there's not a lot you take away, and you're like, okay, overall, great game on both sides for the most part.
Yeah, and I think with what we've seen from Jordan Love, like, I don't think people are really giving this guy the credit he deserves because while he is having a lot of interceptions here, it's not like it's not like in a chaotic way where it feels like he comes right down, makes up for his mistake there. He had 2 picks in this game, but he never throws more picks than he does touchdowns. And his team is always in a good position to win, and he keeps it a close game, and he's led the Packers to pretty much every victory now outside of, he came back versus the Vikings. That was kind of a sloppy game, but like, it's going to be fireworks and it's almost like in Ben Roethlisberger fashion. And I know like maybe like they're not the same stature, but it feels like a similar style of backyard football with Ben Roethlisberger where it's like you can't help but be entertained with that guy where maybe you have your games where you have Big Ben versus the Jaguars, but then you have your game of Big Ben when he played the Colts in back-to-back years and had 2 games where he threw for 500 yards. Like, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from Jordan Love at this point with the Packers, and I feel like it's time to start talking about him as a contender for top 5 quarterbacks because you look at what his contemporary did on the other side of the ball, like, you both played the same amount of football here. Like, what am I missing? Is
Yeah,
Nico
and
Collins
CJ,
that good? Like,
yeah, where was Stephon Diggs too? Like Stephon Diggs was nowhere to be found. Wasn't a great game for Stroud. Jordan Love. I just want to. I have his game logs up for this year. Let's keep in mind he missed 2 games. It goes 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. Every single game he's thrown multiple touchdowns, and every single game he's thrown at least 1 interception. So you just get it all with Jordan Love. But I will say, his interceptions aren't like bone breaking. It's not like they're on the goal line and he throws an interception. It's typically earlier in the drive for the most part. So like, yeah, he throws a lot of picks, but it's not like it's like a soul sucking interception. Typically, he's wailing it downfields to a Dontavian Wicks type, and then it just goes to the defender, and that's an interception. But then the
Some
next
of these
drive,
are
they get a
punts.
touchdown.
Some
Yeah,
of these are
basically
punts.
punts, pretty much. It's usually on third down. So it's like, okay,
Do you like the Roethlisberger comparison though? Like you kind of just
yeah,
with Ben, let's like Ben was never the best quarterback, but damn, he was always like four.
yeah. I think Jordan Love, like, the lowest you can have Jordan Love is 6, and the highest you can have Jordan Love is like 4. Honestly, at this point, he's got to be in that top 5. You can put him at 5, you can put him at 6, wherever you want to put him, but he's he's a top 10 quarterback. He's elite at this point. He's insane to watch. I love watching him play. Jordan Love's
Yeah.
insane.
And he was my MVP pick this year, and he missed 2 games, which I was kind of bummed about, like messed it up. But like, I still feel like there's a chance where if they come back and take the division from the Lions, that Jordan Love could be the MVP. But you know, we'll see. Is this Are you now? I mean, Mixon had 25 rushes for 115 yards, but C.J. Stroud 10 for 21. I mean, these are like Daniel Jones numbers here that he's putting up. You dominate the Patriots, but Nico Collins should not matter this much to you if you're expecting to get to and win a Super Bowl, even if he's on the team there. Like, it feels very Aaron Rodgers when Devontae Adams would go down, you know?
I'm a little worried about CJ Stroud. I expected him to regress maybe slightly. Like, it's a sophomore slump, and there's a lot more pressure on the Texans this year than last. But so far, 10 touchdowns, 4 picks, his QBR 95. It's still relatively early, so I guess I shouldn't panic too much. But it is a little concerning that you couldn't throw a single passing touchdown, that you're throwing half of your completions. And for some reason, like, Stephon Diggs is by no means a washed wide receiver. He's still a very good wide receiver. Where has Stephon Diggs been this whole season? And your number one receiving person was Dalton Schultz. You know, like, I just, and he had 1 catch, by the way. So I'm not overly impressed with what I've seen with Stephon Diggs so far in Houston. And then I just feel like CJ Stroud, I think it's a small slump, but I feel like he has slightly regressed from year one. He's a little bit more turnover prone, and he isn't quite as effective as he was last year.
Yeah, for sure. And it's weird because CJ Stroud suddenly, like, he had like a good year, got to the playoffs, and then suddenly he's like this big brother figure already in the NFL.
Yeah, like when he was saying, talking to Caleb and stuff.
Yeah, people like rip Jason Tatum for stuff like this, but like, can we treat CJ Stroud with the same energy?
Yeah, because he's only a rookie. He's 23, just turned 23 3 weeks ago. Like, he's still super young, and he's got a lot to. He won 1 playoff game. It's not like he's like Lamar, Josh Allen, Mahomes, Burrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get what you mean.
So he should get better, though. I'm not too worried about CJ Stroud and the Texans, but this was just, I felt like Jordan Love at this point is a better quarterback than CJ Stroud going into this game. And this was a good test for both, but I still believe that coming out of this game. And this was really just a confirmation that I do think Jordan Love is chasing top 5 at the end of the year, and he could be right up there with Burrow, um, Lamar and Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and hell, even Jared Goff this season is entering for a top position because, I mean, we talked about how underrated Goff is, and now suddenly it's cool to talk about that. When we talked about this last year, surprise, surprise again, where the Brickyard was right. Like, we're like, Jared Goff is, we would take him over Dak. I would take him over players like Justin Herbert at this point in his career. And it's like, I think he's like a Matt Ryan type player, but he's so accurate. Some of the balls he's throwing are insane. He's just a really good quarterback, and he's the perfect quarterback for the Detroit Lions at this point. And you want to talk about a game? A game of football where it's just ups and downs. The Lions blow two 13-point leads in this game to the Vikings, where the Vikings come back, go back out on top. The first quarter, like, the Lions looked like they were getting blitzed. Like, they go for the fake punt. They don't end up getting it. And then they find a David Montgomery goes down, which for most teams, if David Montgomery goes down, you're thinking, okay, how are we going to have a running game here? But for the Lions, they're like, oh, David Montgomery goes down. Oh, you mean Jameer Gibbs gets to touch the ball more? and have 115 yards. Like, it sucks that David Montgomery got hurt, but like Jameer Gibbs is now a player where you can look at him and really be like, is this the second coming of Alvin Kamara? Because it definitely looks like it. It's the same style of football. That was my comparison for him last year at the end of the season. And he can get out of the backfield. He has a big game in this one. And then again, I talked about with the Packers when Jordan Love got the ball. I had no doubt that they were going to go out there and win the game. And when Jared Goff went out there and got the ball, like, I didn't think the Lions or the Vikings would get blitzed by the Lions in this game by no means, but I knew coaching matters, and I like Dan Campbell currently better right now than Kevin O'Connell, and your quarterback matters. And when you have Jared Goff versus Sam Darnold, sorry, Jared Goff is going to win 9 times out of 10 every single time. He may have an off game once where you can get him, but this game mattered for the Lions. This is the team that has been on a quest for destiny, breaking curses here and getting better every year. Like, sorry, you started out 5-0. That's nice. It's time to let the big boys take control of the division and sit pretty now at the top of the NFC, which is where we should have been last season if the refs weren't literally, Eminem said it's okay, retarded. Like, if that wasn't the case last season, we all saw it. We all saw them report. People who didn't watch football, who watched it, even understood that the ref messed up. That's how bad of an error it was. But no, they're right back on top of the NFC, where they should be. It was a nice start for the Vikings, but you're going to start to lose some games here, and that luck is going to run out a little bit. But I still do think that the Vikings are a solid team and better than most. Like, they're still
Yeah,
up there.
I
They're
agree.
still like at least a tier 3 team.
I'm going to share with you some numbers with Jared Goff, okay? Over the last 3 games, he's thrown 10 incompletions, in which case he's thrown 7 touchdowns. 7 touchdowns, 10 incompletions, 0 interceptions, completion rating of 85, and a QBR that's well over 120. So Jared Goff is playing. I mean, can you call it perfect football? I think you can call it pretty damn close. We're talking about QBRs in the 150s at this point for Jared
MVP.
Goff, and it's yeah, you can put MVP in the conversation. He's thrown for right around 300 yards each game too, so it's not like he's doing little dump offs either. He's making these big throws. We saw that Sam Laporta flea flicker last game, and now it's just any given time. What I like about the Lions is they all have ego, but it's for the greater good. It's all for like Amon Ra. He's got a certain swagger about him, but it's not about Amon Ra. It's about the Detroit Lions. Jameer Gibbs, he has a swagger. It's about the Lions. Sam Laporta, Jamison Williams. You get the idea. The whole team just rallies around Detroit. They all rally around Dan Campbell. And yeah, Jared Goff, can I put him in the MVP conversation? Absolutely. You can put him there right with Lamar. At this point, they're 5-1. Jared Goff has thrown 10 incompletions over a month, basically. How can you deny that there? And then for the Vikings, I think this is a game that you lose, but I think you can say that you lost this with dignity. It wasn't a complete annihilation. Sam Darnold still played good. Aaron Jones had a good game as well. Justin Jefferson had a Justin Jefferson type of game. So it's like it's one of those games that for the Vikings, I can't completely bury them, although I do think they are going to start to come down to earth a little bit. But the Lions, it's like they're just an absolute wagon. They have depth, and then again, Jared Goff playing absolutely incredible. Jameer Gibbs had how many scrimmage yards did he have? He had 150 if you count receiving yards as well. Like you can't go wrong with that. You're talking about you mentioned Alvin Kamara. I think that's a good comparison. Like the
Or
Lions are an
prime Aaron
absolute
Jones.
wagon. Yeah, it's like can I see where can I see a loss in the future for them? They're going to beat the Titans. The Packers, sure, that might be a tough game. Texans, maybe. Jags, they'll beat the Colts. And then eventually the Bears. It's like I just feel like they're just on a complete roll. They lose to the Bucks, and then ever since then they've just been an absolute wagon.
Yeah, no, they've been a complete wagon. And the Vikings, you mentioned, they gave you everything that they're going to give you. Like, this is a really good game for the Minnesota Vikings, and this is something you can hang your hat on. Like, Sam Darnold gave you, like, a really good Sam Darnold game. And the fact that Sam Darnold played that well in this game is absolutely insane compared to where he was at the status of this league coming into the season. Like, this is a amazing game for Sam Darnold that he threw for 260 and a touchdown. Like, the Giants would kill to get that out of Daniel Jones. So I thought that was great. Like Aaron Jones rushing for 93 yards, Justin Jefferson doing his thing, and you're going to get Hawkinson back. Like The fact that the Lions just took what the Vikings gave them didn't matter. Didn't matter at all. And like they're clearly the best team in the NFC at this point with what is going on with the 49ers. And this is, again, a team that was underestimated. Where you talk about Gerard Mayo, where he's like, my team is soft. Your team is soft? Really? How about you're soft? You're shaped like the doughboy. And then Dan Campbell, jacked as a tight end, doing up downs with his team. I mean, if Gerard Mayo is out there doing up downs with the Patriots, my God, we may have to call an ambulance and he'll have a heart attack if he does the same amount Dan Campbell does. If he's that enthusiastic about his team. You know what happens when the Lions lose, like the Patriots lost in Dan Campbell's first year? I need to be better. Not my team is soft. I need to be better with Dan Campbell. It's like, it's not on them. He always takes the blame for it. And then you have a rookie head coach and some of these coaches like, oh, my team. Like, no, you. And then you point out your team where you can better. You have that conversation behind closed doors. But, like, this isn't a guy like Gerard Mayo who's earned the credibility to do that when someone like Dan Campbell constantly takes the fall for everything on his team and says, I need to be better. And that's why the Lions rally around him. That selfless swagger is the confidence that Dan Campbell embodies, because this is still a ragtag bunch a little bit where you have your Hutchinsons who got injured, but you have Jameer Gibbs, but you have also your Amarons who was overlooked. You have Jared Goff who was overlooked on this team. You have some players on your defense and Aaron Glenn who have been overlooked. People were calling for his jobs. Like, that is the just identity of this team, and they still are focused on that one goal. And I feel like that's what drives this team is you still do have the vibe of overlooked players, and people go out there and they play for Jared Goff because they know how much it means for him.
Hell, even Jameer Gibbs, he's a guy that was taken after Bijan on this draft. A lot of people had him lower than Bijan in the running back core. They were questioning why they even took Jameer
Jameer.
Gibbs in the draft. They were like, oh, why they need defense. Why don't they go after him? They questioned the Jack Campbell pick, which has panned out. They questioned this Terrion Arnold pick, which is panning out to some extent, although he has had some penalty issues. It's like no matter who they draft, they seem to just fit into that glue. Um, whether it be the Derek Barnes, who's been absolutely incredible for them, Brian Branch, which we should talk about where he is as far as elite secondaries in the NFL. He's been exceptional for them. I think he has, what, 5 interceptions this year already? So he's been
Yeah.
killing it. So I think just the defense has stepped up. Their offense has been an absolute wagon. And I just you can't say enough good things about the Lions this year and how they played. And then credit to the Vikings, too.
Yeah, credit to the Vikings, but the Lions are in that spot now as a wagon with a team. I feel like the Buffalo Bills and the Ravens and the Bengals, what they have been the past few seasons, and right there with the 49ers. And I think they're the best team in the NFC, but we will see going forward. Excited to see where the Lions go. Two teams we're not excited for. You know, I texted you and I was heartbroken when I saw this, but shoulder
Oh,
injury kept him out of the game. Will Levis was not able to play on Sunday versus the
don't remind
Buffalo
me.
Bills. And for this game, I mean, I guess, you know, you had to play Mason Rudolph because of the shoulder injury, but I said, Bills, beat them, 30 something to like 9 or 13. And that is exactly what happened. They went out there, beat them 34-10. You have Amari Cooper asking Keelan Coleman, hey, what route am I supposed to be running here? And then after that, going out there and getting touchdowns, I think the Cooper pickup just made sense for the Buffalo Bills. He's a wide receiver that him and just Josh Allen make sense together on that football field where he's the supreme route runner. You have two good tight ends now. Your running game has been better than the past few years. Josh Allen simply just not turning the ball over yet so far now. So for the Bills, you went out there, did exactly what we were able to do. And since Will Levis didn't play for the Titans, I refuse to talk about them this week.
Yeah, the Bills' opponent this week, I mean, they had a different quarterback, but it felt like the same results. Still had turnovers, still didn't play great football, still didn't have a great quarterback play. So the Bills' opponent, 3 fumbles as well, 4 fumbles as a team, by the way. Not very pretty for the Bills' opponent. Now for the Bills, I mean, Josh Allen, it's been set pretty much half a season. He hasn't thrown an interception. for a guy last year who threw a pick basically every game, and that wasn't an exaggeration. I want to credit Josh Allen the way he's kind of changed his approach as a quarterback. He's not playing Superman anymore. I think the addition of James Cook and how good he's been for them as a running back. Didn't have a great game this game, but in general, James Cook's been very good for them on the ground. I think credits to him. And then, yeah, Amari Cooper. I mean, he's one of those guys. He was good with Derek Carr. He was good with Dak. Hell, he was even as good as he could possibly be with Deshaun Watson. You put Josh Allen, like he's gonna fit in, like he's gonna fit like glue. And then Keon Coleman had a good game as well. So Bills played great. Dalton Kincaid stepping up for them as well. And yeah, they beat
Yeah.
the Tennessee Titans. And I don't want to talk about the Titans either because we missed out on a lot of good memes this week because
Who?
Mason Rudolph was starting instead of Will Levis.
No, that team, that opponent doesn't exist without Will Levis. Sorry, they're meaningless. So we don't address them as we don't say their name when Will Levis doesn't play. But yeah, credit to the Bills. Ever since they made a offensive coordinator change, Josh Allen really hasn't had a turnover issue, and it seems like they've been able to fix it. So I guess credit to Sean McDermott there. Can't believe I'm saying that, but you changed your offensive coordinator, and hey, your team has looked better. We were wondering why they didn't run the ball before. Well, now your new coordinator is like, hey, maybe we should take the pressure off of Josh Allen and he will be even better, not feel the weight of the world on him. And seems like he kind of just took that weight off of Josh Allen. He's also in the flow this season, so it's cool to see him not turn the ball over. So we'll see how long that lasts there. Um, you know, let's just get this game out of the way. The Bengals and the Browns, they played. Joe Burrow in his career, you know, you want to talk about curses that have haunted franchises and players, has been terrible versus the Cleveland Browns. He has not won in Cleveland. I mean, as soon as someone does it for the first time, it seems like everyone starts doing it. Well, Justin Herbert wins in Denver, and then the very next week, Joe Burrow wins for the first time in Cleveland here. I mean, he obviously should have won this game in Cleveland. There's many more games he should have won, but you know, he actually went out there and as Jason Tatum said, we did it. We went out there, we beat the Browns in Cleveland. Joe Burrow, congratulations. You finally got that weight off your chest. And then Deshaun Watson, the big controversy is the Cleveland Browns fans booing him.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When I saw that and I saw them booing them, I'm like, yeah. And it's like, are they booing a good person? No. Are they
No.
booing him because of the injury? Not really. They're booing him because he's a horrible person. He's destroyed the franchise, and he fucking sucks. So for me, when they booed him, I'm like, yeah, he got what he deserved. Look what he's done. Look at the numbers between Houston and Cleveland. They're night and day. It's like there's a rogue agent playing as Deshaun Watson over the last 3 years.
They
So when
cloned
he
him.
went, and I hate to say it because maybe I'm a bit of an asshole for saying this, but I was actually kind of happy a little bit. I don't wish him to be hurt or anything. I wish him relatively well. I wouldn't want him to be completely destroyed of life. But for the Browns, you want to talk about the worst best case scenario for you? Deshaun Watson gets hurt. Okay, they tried DTR. He sucked. Surprise, surprise. But then great news comes because then after everything, Jameis Winston arrives. He has what does he have? He has three. He goes 5 for 11. He throws a touchdown. I'm like, okay, we get to see Jameis Winston. That's a check. Nick Chubb is back, although I think it'll take him a while for him to get into rhythm. That's good news. Cleveland gets two good news. Jameis Winston is now your quarterback, which is better than Deshaun Watson, and Nick Chubb is back. That's a win. David Njoku had a good game. That's a win for you as well. Wins across the board for Cleveland, even as they continue to pile up losses. For me, this is a day of celebration and not a day of wham wham. Oh no, Cleveland fans, so shitty. No shit. They burned LeBron James' jersey. Cleveland Browns, they were praising themselves getting a serial rapist on their team a couple of years back. They booed Baker Mayfield out of town. How does that go for them? Cleveland, you want to celebrate the guy who has ruined your franchise by congratulating him for getting hurt? By all means. It's not like Cleveland is the base of morality on this team. This is the same team that gave him the most money guaranteed of all time, which is their own stupidity. You want to talk about shooting yourself in the foot? How about shooting yourself in the dick and never making babies again, killing your bloodline? That's basically what the Browns did already. So I don't care. Like, you want to root for him getting hurt? By all means, go ahead, Cleveland. You guys have already stooped low enough. You might as well sloop to the fucking dirt at this point.
Yeah, it's crazy all the things he mentioned that they had booed, and when you put it in that context, we're like, if you booed this and didn't boo this, wow, Cleveland, that's actually shocking that you didn't boo that there. So, apologies, MGK, but what did you expect from Cleveland? Of course they're gonna boo this guy here, and then the people online was like, oh, well, it actually hasn't been proven against him. It was a bunch of faulty cases that he had to settle and pay a bunch of money. There's just a bunch of gold digging whores, as Bill Burr would say. But when you have that many, like usually with the Matu case, as Liam Neeson would say, you get one, two, maybe three if you're lucky, five, and some stations try and call a bunch of articles if they're trying to coordinate or cancel you, or you're just looking for money against the celebrity. But 29 that you
That's
settled, like, I don't know. That's a little much for me. It's like I know, like I don't actually know what was there and what happened, but the meme of um, Deshaun Watson when it's like his first day in rehab and it's just the deep from the first episode of The Boys. Like I'm sure you saw that one
oh yeah.
with Starlight where he just like drops his towel. Like yeah, that makes sense. And for this Cleveland Browns team, do you think this will actually help Cleveland's curses because you have the Guardians lose a tough World Series there, or actually they beat the Cubs, but you have Cleveland
Mm.
who can't really figure it out with the Cavaliers or Browns, and your baseball team has been bad at times. Do you think this is finally where they boo the right thing? It may actually help their franchise and turn around that aura there, where it's like, or is it just like, no, Cleveland being shitty where a guy gets injured and now all of their players hate them? Where Miles Garrett, after the press conference, is like, uh, even though I tried to hit someone without a helmet on, with the helmet, I think that that's a really shitty thing to do coming from the guy who, if he hit Mason Rudolph, potentially could have killed him, could have turned him into a vegetable, and then we would have got to see that arc with Mason Rudolph where we had vegetable ESPN on X. But do you think this gives some of the players pause to cause, or now we probably will see someone like Miles Garrett, who's in trade talks, leave the Browns, and the players want to leave the team?
First of all, I just want to say, maybe selfishly, that had he connected, we probably would have seen Will Levis this past week against the Bills. So honestly, maybe he should have connected. Secondly, do I think that if you're asking me that you think the curses of Cleveland have been eradicated because they cheered for a guy who tore his Achilles and is out for the season? Probably not. Cleveland Indians, or now the Guardians, did blow a 3-1 lead in the World Series to the Chicago Cubs. They're still
Okay,
cursed.
so they lost that one.
Um, the Cavaliers, the closest thing they came to breaking any curses was when LeBron, who, by the way, you burned his jersey because he left Anderson Varejao and Mo Williams from your team to join Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. What an asshole LeBron was to
What
leave
about
your
the guy
shitty
who
ass
fucked his
franchise.
mom? Like,
Yeah, Delonte West, who, by the way, fucked his mother. I can't believe LeBron left Cleveland in such a drastic way, going to Miami, who had 44 wins. Don't even get me started there. He comes back, he wins you a championship. He leaves to go to LA. I don't blame him. Cleveland sucks. And then for the Browns, who have had how many quarterbacks since 2000? They have Baker Mayfield, who finally is their answer at quarterback. And they say, sorry, Baker, we prefer rapists over you. So
great.
they get rid of Baker Mayfield, who, by the way, is now leading the Bucks to divisional titles, which the Browns have not even sniffed since then. And then you give Deshaun Watson, who has, 30 allegations against him. You give him the most money ever, more than Patrick Mahomes, more than Lamar Jackson, more than Josh Allen, and the list could go on and on. He still has the most guaranteed money, and that contract was 3 years ago. But it gets better. He's terrible for you, which I'm not surprised. I would do the same thing if I was a serial rapist and I've already made my money for the rest of my life. Who cares? It's Cleveland. No matter what, they're still going to suck. So then he gets hurt, and I don't even blame Cleveland for cheering for him getting hurt. Like, honest to God, He's been so bad for your organization. He's like the Ryan Leaf of your generation. Complete he's the enemy of that team. He's not like a LeBron who got booed when he came back. He's not like Kyrie and these other guys. He is the worst person that Cleveland could have possibly asked for. But you still cheered for him when you traded for him. So no, Cleveland will still be cursed. They're going to start Jameis Winston, which will be equally as cursed, maybe. I think they're still going to
Yeah.
suck. Maybe Myles Garrett leaves. Either way, Cleveland will continue to be Cleveland because even if they get a good thing, they're going to find a way to fuck it up.
Yeah, don't cheer for me. Don't cheer for me when you think I'm an MVP caliber grapist, and then boo me when I'm a terrible at football grapist. Like, show some respect. Keep the same standard, Cleveland.
Yeah, come on, Cleveland. You booed the king out of town, and then he comes back, wins you a title, leaves again. You boo him when he returns. Okay, Cleveland. You even if you guys have a star, you still don't embrace him. So either way, Cleveland deserves to be where they are. So I don't care. Cleveland can deserve to suffer. And Deshaun, heal quick. That's all I'm gonna. I hope Deshaun Watson comes back next week because that's what they deserve. They deserve to still suck. And I hope Deshaun
Yeah.
Watson's still on that team next year and he continues to suck because this is what you did. This is almost like a ticket out for Cleveland, and this is a win-win for Cleveland and Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson gets massage after massage after massage, which you know he's licking his pearls over, and then Cleveland gets a ticket out because now they get to have Jimbo Jameis go out there, whip the ball down the field to Cedric Tillmans of the world, and they can find their way out of the number one overall pick. It's a win-win. Cleveland screws themselves, and Deshaun screws some therapists. It's great.
Yeah. Some therapists, yeah, some physical therapists, yeah. I mean, a torn Achilles for this guy who already looked this bad. Like, is he even gonna play football again?
I
I
wouldn't.
don't think so. I would bet money that he's not gonna play football again.
Bummer.
But I'm also like, there's still. We talked about the Deshaun Watson part with the Cleveland Browns, but how about the part that they went to DTR first?
That was my other point. That was the other thing. I'm like, oh no, Watson's down. Womp womp. Jameis time.
Jameis, right?
Jameis time. I'm ready. Jameis, let's go. He's back. I said to you guys on the worst top fives, I'm like, oh my god, they will be stapled to my top five until they play Jameis. Outcomes: Dorian Thomas and Robinson. What? I'm like, wait a minute.
DTR
Deshaun
needs CPR.
Jameis Winston is the third string? Jameis Winston is not the third string. He had 5,000 passing yards. He went 30 for 30. I understand Jameis Winston's by no means a rock star in some people's hearts. He is to me at least. But he's your third string behind DTR. And DTR, what does he do? He has 11
82 yards and 2 picks.
Yeah, he throws the ball to the other team more often. The only person who scored a passing touchdown for you this week, by the way, Jameis Winston. Surprise, surprise. And he'll be starting this next week. So good. At least they figured things out.
In 11 attempts, too. That's how much it took him to score a touchdown. I get you were out of it at that point, but DTR needs CPRs back in the game. Like, I thought we figured out last season that no, this isn't a good idea. Not at all.
No, it's not. It's a nightmare. He actually
How is
did what
Jameis your third string?
he's done what Deshaun Watson hasn't done since October 6th, which is throw a passing touchdown. And DTR, I don't even know if he's ever thrown a passing touchdown. I'd be surprised if he has, to be completely honest. Maybe he has, maybe. Either way, it doesn't matter. Oh, I'm sorry. Threw one passing touch. He threw as many passing touchdowns as Dorian Thompson Robinson has his entire career in 11 passes. I rest my case. Jameis Winston, he's been even they can't even treat Jameis Winston right. Good lord. The only person they treat with dignity is Deshaun Watson. Give me a break, Cleveland. Figure out who you should root for fuck's sake. I want to talk about Cincinnati first, though. I want to talk about Cincy because you gave me all this shit last week because I'm like, this offense looked pretty bad against New York, and the first drive, I'm like, okay, things are looking better. They scored 2 times in the third quarter, but for the most part, it's pretty low. For the most part, I don't know. Offense, they should be fine, but I'm still like, what's going on with this offense for Cincinnati? Because this game was still closer than I'd like it to be. 21-6 was the most part of the game, but I don't know. I didn't love this offense either.
Yeah, their offense does have question marks, and it was one of those games where the past few weeks, It feels like the Bengals have been playing to their competition here, where like the Commanders lost, they put up points with them, and the defense gets taken out. The Ravens, they're still putting up points, and the offense is doing what it needs to do to win every single game here. And Joe Burrow is someone who has got to a Super Bowl, and he knows how to play winning football, rise to the occasion, and not do too much in a situation like this versus Cleveland. Doesn't need to take a ton of chances, and he's had some horror shows in Cleveland before where this is the first time that he's winning in Cleveland. So I feel like with the Bengals, the huge concern about this team was the defense, where he had back-to-back games with the Ravens and the Commanders, where it doesn't look they can stop anybody. And then in back-to-back weeks, their defense goes out there, holds two bad teams to only scoring twice in each game, and the Giants only scored one time here. And now the defense is finally stepping up here. So I think at some point for the Bengals, I do have faith that it'll level out here. It will take some time. Now, do I think they're as dynamic as the Ravens this season? No. Or the Steelers? Potentially. I'm interested to see how the Bengals and Steelers match up, but I just want to see it level out. I'm not in panic mode yet here until their offense gets overwhelmed in a situation where they don't step up and do what they need to do. Seems like defense caught up, offense is a little lethargic right now. Let's see what they do against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean next week they face the Eagles. So if they can go back to 4-4, I feel pretty good because their schedule gets a little bit easier. They face the Raiders after that. So by the time they face the Ravens in 2 weeks, they're going to be coming off of four straight wins, hopefully, and they'll be 5-4. I don't think they beat the
Yeah.
Ravens at this point, but if they are playing competitively, it's like all right, at least they're back in the fold after starting off as bad as they did. So I don't know. I'm not panicked about the Bengals, but I'm definitely not as high on the Bengals. Um, as I am the team like the Ravens or the Steelers or the
Yeah.
Texans or even
I
no, I can't put them. Yeah, maybe even the Bills.
I could see them like being a wild card, and if the Ravens get the 2 seed and the Bengals are the 7, I could see the Bengals a scenario where they lose to the Ravens twice in the regular season and maybe beat them in the first round of playoffs. Like I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah, that'd be
If it's like
devastating for the
Ravens
Bengals
are a
for
little
the
banged up,
Ravens.
Bengals are turning it up coming into that game, like that's definitely a plausible scenario for this team. And I think that's a realistic matchup, especially with the Chiefs now being the only undefeated team in the league here now. So you're looking at it with the Ravens, like you have two losses, and the Ravens already have the, or the Chiefs already have the tiebreaker on you there. You're probably going to lose a game to Pittsburgh because it seems like Pittsburgh always beats the Ravens here. Now the Chiefs are just kind of sitting there at 5-0 atop the AFC. Again, we talk about Patrick Mahomes. Brady's talking about winning football, how he just does whatever he needs to do to win the game here. And he has 2 interceptions. Not really a great game for him, but their defense still looks elite. And, they just keep winning. But really, the story here is we talked about the 49ers losing the Super Bowl to the Chiefs. And now we said they were going to fall apart. The last time that Kyle Shanahan lost a Super Bowl, they were the most injured team in football. And I was like, I don't see a reason why that's not going to happen again here. And it's, not the most fun prediction to make because you want to see players stay healthy. But Super Bowl hangover is real, especially for an older team like this. And now you just paid Brandon Ayuk. He's out for the season. Christian McCaffrey has a now career worrying Achilles injury. You just paid him on your team. You paid Debo Samuel, and then now he's getting pneumonia and leaving the game here. And now your defense is getting banged up with player like Ufunga and Hargrave going down. Like, I feel like it's going to get a lot worse for the 49ers. And then you see after the game, Kyle Shanahan having a 5-minute talk with Brock Purdy just sitting there, not saying anything throughout the entire time. And it looks like he's taken a step back this season. Didn't look like he knew where he was versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Didn't look like a top tier quarterback who's going to go up against a good defense where someone like you see Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff, they look poised even when they have gone up against the Kansas City Chiefs. And it's a close game where Brock Purdy just looked lost out there. And I get Samuel went down, and I get Ayuk is out for the year, but like you still have a good running game to lean on, and George Kittle was still playing very well in this team, and you still have other weapons here.
Yeah, plus you also have a top five head coach in Kyle Shanahan too, who should be able to. I mean, you've built rapport with him to this point. Yeah, the Niners I think are screwed at this point, and I'll pull up their schedule too because I am interested to see. They should beat the Cowboys because the Cowboys are pathetic, but we have like the Bucks, the Seahawks, the Packers, the Bills, the Bears, all in a row. And those are all games that you could lose. Whether it be all of them or some of those games, those are all games you can lose easily. That's 5 games in a row that are just absolutely rough. And then if the Rams get back to full strength, that's another team that you typically play pretty competitively against. But yeah, no, Brock. The thing with Brock Purdy, a lot of people are talking about too, is like this is his third year now, and now it's like, are they going to pay him? Is the question. I don't think they will. And if they do, it should not be for the contracts that you're seeing Tua get, or Kyler Murray, or these other guys, Lawrence getting like. But yeah, he hasn't played great to this year. I think the thing that was really attractive about him when he first came onto the scene was that he was being really efficient. Either he's completing a lot of passes, moving the ball forward, or he's playing clean football. Hasn't been that way on either side. He hasn't played efficiently, and he hasn't played clean football either. Like he threw 3 picks in this game. He's got 7 on the season. His completion rating has plummeted. His yards per game have plummeted. His QBR has plummeted. Like everything is kind of plummeting for Brock Purdy. And I feel like now maybe he's coming back down to earth. I still think he'll be a formidable quarterback, but I just think that the story that we had originally with Mr. Irrelevant, maybe it's starting to come down, back down to earth a little bit. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah,
and it's interesting because Kyle Shanahan, sees what Sean McVay did in division, and after they paid Jared Goff, they traded him away for Matthew Stafford here, and it felt like Stafford was the missing piece for that team. They just needed a quarterback who had the arm talent, who could really go out there and do it. And you look at what Andy Reid did when he got to Kansas City is he brought in Alex Smith here, who maybe wasn't his first choice for quarterback, but then he built the team around him. Then he finally got the quarterback he knew was right for the team in Patrick Mahomes. Like, I still think that trade would make sense because then Jim Harbaugh can build the team he wants. You pay Brock Purdy like a mid tier contract there, and you can build a good team around him. And then the Niners get 2, 3 good years under Herbert before the team falls apart. Like I feel like that would be another good reason. And then a few years later, maybe you make sure you can get out of the trade within 2 years, and then bring a quarterback up to speed under Brock Purdy, someone who's got to a Super Bowl. Like I feel like it makes sense for both teams.
yeah. I don't know if the Chargers want to get rid of Herbert though. That's a tough shoot. I feel like Herbert's good enough that you don't want to deal him unless you absolutely have to. But I do think they should get another quarterback. And if they do pay Brock Purdy, pay him a Geno Smith deal, 100 million, 3 years, get out of it after 2 years. Like that's the kind of deal I would do with Brock Purdy. I don't think he would want that, but I think that's the deal he deserves. To be honest, at this point,
Yeah.
because I think he's a franchise guy, but I just don't think for a 49ers team like you can go out and get someone, whether it be someone like maybe a Kyler Murray or thinking of quarterbacks that are on the move potentially. I feel like maybe that's when you can kind of fill those shoes a little bit better. Dak Prescott,
Yeah,
maybe.
you have to be fine to walk away from Brock Purdy if someone's willing to pay him max money here.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like if like Tennessee, Carolina, God forbid, is gonna trade him. Maybe you do a trade. You trade Trevor Lawrence for Brock Purdy. I don't know.
I
But
would.
yeah, you have to be fine to walk away, and you can't pay him to a level dollars there, or you're never gonna go anywhere. Especially even with what Dak is making. Like Dak is still making too much money as well for what he brings the Cowboys.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to talk about the Chiefs though, because everyone, even though the Chiefs are 6-0, and even though they are the only undefeated team in football, and even though for the most part they put up 28 points, they had a good running game despite losing Pacheco. Kareem Hunt came back, he played well. Travis Kelsey, whatever he might be. Everyone's talking about Mahomes and how some people are putting him in the MVP conversation, other people are saying he sucks this year. You look at his numbers aren't pretty, But for me, it's like, dude, it's week 7 of the NFL. This guy has won 3 Super Bowls. He's a multiple time MVP. Relax. I'm not worried about Mahomes. I understand he has more interceptions than touchdowns, but Mahomes is not playing for regular season. I feel like he's just kind of walking through, just doing whatever he can to win. But I don't think it matters all that much that he's struggling, or if you even want to call it struggling at this point. I think the Chiefs are still fine. They're 6-0. They're the 1 seed. Get over it. Shut up. I'm sorry that Patrick Mahomes is not your winner in fantasy. For fuck's sake. What do you feel about Mahomes with his struggles? Do you think this is cause to pause, or do you think this is just the regular season for a team that has bigger sights in mind?
Yeah, pause for the 3-time Super Bowl champion. Oh my god. He's undefeated and I'm so concerned. Like they scored 28 points. They're undefeated. Like sure, it's not perfect, but like Mahomes hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt. I'm sorry about your dumb fantasy team. And like fantasy's fun. People play it. It's a good time. But when you base your whole NFL outlook where this player sucks because my fantasy team and wham, I want him to be better, like okay, then you don't actually care about football. You just care about your gambling addiction and fantasy and paying money to win that year. And then you drafted Mahomes and now you're sad about it. But like, he is doing exactly what he needs for his team to win games. And they're the only undefeated team, and people are worried about it. Like, there is no reason to be worried about Patrick Mahomes at all. And the people that are concerned about it simply do not understand how the game of football works. Like, Brady has had years where his stats don't look impressive, but like his number one receiver is Noah Gray. Travis Kelsey looks like he's lost a step. Xavier Worthy is still a rookie year. We're relying on Juju Smith Schuster. Like his receiver core is nothing to write home about, and he's surviving without losing a game. Like, can you please write back to me when the Chiefs get blown out multiple games in a row, because every team has a bad game. Like you're allowed at least maybe a blowout and just a bad game each year for any team, but like the Chiefs just keep winning, and the fact that their defense is that good and all Patrick Mahomes has to do is make a couple plays, maybe you run into a team like the Ravens and you don't have enough firepower, but the Chiefs are still going to have their annual Arrowhead Invitational. And I'm sorry, but their division is not that good either. You have the Chargers there, you have the Broncos there, and we saw what the Chargers look like versus Arizona. And they're not going to lose to the Broncos or the Raiders this year, so I do think they're still going to be the one seed. And you have to go into Arrowhead and score on their defense if you want to get to the Super Bowl. And you have to hope it's not a one possession game with the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands, because if it is, you're going to lose. But could I allow them an off year because no one in the history of the NFL has won back to back Super Bowls? Sure. You're not expected to make history every year. Like, what are we talking about? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, they've never had a three-peat in the NFL. They've already won back-to-back Super Bowls. So the fact that people are panicking, I think, is a little absurd. They, if they win 3 straight, like this is something that Brady never did. This is something that the Cowboys, Steelers, Niners never did. Like we're talking about history here, and I don't think it's crazy that Travis Kelsey looks a little bit older. Mahomes maybe has his struggles this year. They don't win this year. It's like, okay, maybe it's the Ravens' turn. Maybe it's the Bengals. Maybe it's CJ Stroud's turn, Josh Allen. I don't think it's the end of the world. I just think they're still going to be in that championship window for the next 10 years. I'm not overly worried. I think the Chiefs are doing just fine, considering they're 6-0, despite Mahomes' struggle. When we get closer to, let's say, December, and they face the Chargers and Browns and Texans and everybody, that's when I feel like we're going to see the Mahomes that we know and love.
Yeah, for sure. And it may take time to see that, but um, like it's just him in the playoffs is a totally different animal. Like this has happened the past 2 years, and also like, can we not? Can we why are we pretending his receivers are good? They're not. You give most quarterbacks this receiver core, they're not gonna succeed or be undefeated. Like Mahomes may is probably the only quarterback that could succeed with this current offensive unit here.
We're talking about their number one receiver is out for the season, Rashid Rice. Their receiver that they were supposed to pick up this offseason hasn't played yet, Hollywood Brown. Juju Schuster, who you picked up off of the
The
the bus
couch.
station, he's out. And now you're relying on Xavier Worthy, who's a rookie. I think he's solid, but he's a rookie at the end of the day. Justin Watson is no one to write home about. Sky Moore, where in the world is Sky Moore? I've never, like, ever since they drafted Sky Moore, who was supposed to be the Tyreek replacement, he's been a complete shell. And then it's McCole Hardman. Like, these are all guys who are not excellent. They go to another team. We forget they exist. McCole Hardman, that happened actually in literal time with the Jets. He went to the Jets. I think he had 6 catches before they got back to Kansas City. Like, let's stop with this whole thing. Travis Kelsey's also definitely older, and there's no doubt about it. Probably his last year. 6-0. That's all I'm going to. That comes down to they're still winning games. Their defense, when you got to face Chris Jones, you got to face Nick Bolton, you got to face the George Karlaftis of the world. I'm not worried.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's reactionary fans, people that are too much in their feels about fantasy. Like, it's not okay.
You know who I'm
Go
not
with
worried about, though, at the end of the
who?
day? I'm not worried about Russell Wilson. I'm not worried about Russell Wilson, am I? Do you not remember? Let's see. Last week on the show, I came in with my Russell Wilson Seahawks jersey because I'm like, it's time to turn back the clock. And what did we see? The Steelers completely kill the Jets. The Jets are now 2-5, 37-15. Russell Wilson having a Russell Wilson day. 2 touchdowns, 16 to 29, 260. Najee Harris had a big game. George Pickens had a big game. Defensively, they shut down the Hall of Fame quarterback Aaron Rodgers, Hall of Fame Devontae Adams, and Russell Wilson. He's back at the fold. A lot of flack from Mike Tomlin for starting him over Justin Fields. Well, 37 points. You like that? I love it. Dangerous is
I know.
back.
Mike, the crazy thing with Mike Tomlin is Chris Collins, where it's like, what are your plans with what's your goal with Russell Wilson here starting? And Mike Tomlin's like, I don't know. I just want to see. I just want to see who's the best to win the Super Bowl. And Collinsworth was telling me like, how long are you like? What's his window? How long are you playing for? And Mike Tom's like, I don't know. I just want to see which quarterback gives me the best chance to succeed here. Like really, just bringing in 2 guys. Like one of you gives you an athletic advantage, but as Brick Jameson said earlier this season, we've all seen enough from Justin Fields, and I feel like with this game, how dominant the Steelers were with Russell Wilson as a Steelers fan, I came into this game with no expectations with Russell Wilson. I didn't want to see this guy get my hopes up here, but it's crazy when you have an actual offensive head coach in Mike Tomlin where he had Kenny Pickett last year lead him to a winning record, which is in the playoffs, which is absolutely insane with Mason Rudolph. And then he made Justin Fields look as good as Justin Fields could possibly look. And now with Russell Wilson, it seems like the Steelers are really elevating talent. And I think the telling thing is that 16 and a half yards was his average in this game per throw. It's not like he was throwing screens in this game. And the fact that him and George Pickens, where Russell Wilson, just the vibe of this team, where he's talking about Justin Fields did an amazing job. He put me in this position. I have so many great teammates here. Him and George Pickens staying late after practice. And what do you know? George Pickens, 5 catches for 111 yards. I don't know how Pickens keeps doing this, where he'll have like 4 or 5 catches and then suddenly 100 yards is on the board. And seeing this guy with Russell Wilson, I mean, Russ had Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. And I think George Pickens is better than both of those players. And Najee Harris, I mean, the guy's gotten a lot of flack, but he's been a legitimate running back in this league this year, and he's been consistent for the Steelers. And this team in this game, you know, it was 15-13. The second half, I was watching it. The Steelers kind of look mean. Like they
Yeah,
kind
they
of
did.
have that like bad boy Steelers vibe back where the defense has carried this team for so many years and now the offense was picking it up and it seemed like the defense is like, wait a minute, we can't let the offense outshine us here. So it seemed like anytime the Steelers were successful on offense, the defense was like, watch this and put Aaron Rodgers right down on the ground there, shut down Devontae Adams, and there's like a little competition now between the Steelers offense and defense, and this is the best that they've looked in a while. And I watched the second half, like this is this is a team no one wants to face anymore. I mean, I don't
No,
want to overhype Russ, but like it took him some time to get going. But if this team just has a guy who can hit open receivers, okay, it
I don't
seems
think
like
he looked.
that works.
I don't think he looked that bad his last year in Denver. I understand why he got him, like why he left, but I felt like the Denver experience for Russ was a lot more humbling than he needed that, especially with all the shit that was going on in Seattle with the agent and everything what Marshawn and Richard Sherman were talking about. I think he needed a
Yeah,
Denver experience to bring him back down to earth, and it feels like so far with Pittsburgh, he's a lot more humble. He's a lot more of a locker room guy. So I hope that continues for him. And I think the Steelers, especially if they go out and get somebody like maybe a DeAndre Hopkins to fulfill that second wide receiver spot, I think they're going to be in a really good spot, especially because I think Russ, even though he might not be the same player of old as far as athleticism wise, I think he still has those throws that he makes. Like Cortland Sutton made some great plays for them last year, and George Pickens I think is an exceptional talent for him. If Russell Wilson can play like he did this past week, then Steelers are a genuine threat in the AFC. And I never believed in the Steelers for the most part, but this year I think that this is the year that they look pretty damn good.
yeah. I mean, they looked that good with Justin Fields. So when I saw them that good, I'm like, oh, when Russ comes back, this will be interesting. Like, I really just wanted to expect Russ. Like, my expectation was Russ to be horrible, like the Russell Wilson we saw in Denver, just so I wasn't let down. But this team looked like an absolute wagon in this game, and
Yeah.
I don't know um, if that is a testament to the Steelers in this game or just the Jets being awful. I mean, we saw them, and the Bills in New York, I'm telling you, it's just one of those games where the Bills genuinely struggle and the Jets kind of have their number there. But the fact that, Zach Wilson was 4-3 at this point, and Aaron Rodgers is 2-5 with pretty much the same team, and now you fired your head coach in season, and your interim head coach is talking about how he texts the old head coach every day for
Oh,
advice here.
brother.
Like, this is just, I don't know what the Jets. I was never a believer of the Jets coming into the season, and I was like, my expectation, the best they can do is a wild card or win the division. You're losing in the first round. This team's not winning a playoff game, but people were putting this team in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. I never believed in the Jets either. I felt like yeah, their defense is good, and I think their peak was 10-7. But like, you go out and you get Devontae. You have a good running back in Brees Hall. You have Garrett Wilson, who's good. Who I've heard that they're shopping, which is crazy. But Aaron Rodgers is 41 years old, and you hear that you're like, oh well, Brady played till he was 45. Drew Brees played till he was 41. That's not the norm. And I think Aaron Rodgers, like, you'll see flashes from him from time to time where he'll be good, but he's not the same Aaron Rodgers who won back to back MVPs. He's not as efficient. His arm isn't quite as there. And I just feel like this team is one of the worst teams that he's had over the last 5, 6 years, even with all the additions that they've had. Offensively, maybe not as much, but the Jets just find a way. We were talking about the Chargers and how they find a way to disappoint their fans. The Jets do it like no one else. If you would have told me that they went and got two future Hall of Famers, wide receiver and quarterback, they already had a great wide receiver and a great running back already, and they had a top five defense, I'd say put them in the Super Bowl. But the Jets, no. Aaron Rodgers gets to play football worse than he's ever played before. Devontae Adams has what, 30 yards of receiving yards? Brees Hall gets stuffed, and they find new ways to disappoint their team each and every week. And now the Jets are 2-5. They're not making the playoffs. Their defense has looked worse, and yeah, they just find new ways to disappoint me. And it's great to see because honestly, Aaron Rodgers, I don't know, 82 QBR, 10 touchdowns, 7 picks, completion rating 62. I definitely think he's lost a step. Jets, I kind of like seeing the Jets fail like this. It's kind of fun. And I'm not even an Aaron Rodgers hater.
Yeah, and you look at this team. I mean, you played. Do you play the North this season? Yeah,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
yeah. So you play the North. That is 4 losses right there. You played the Niners. That's a loss for Aaron Rodgers. Then you lost to the Broncos. Now you lose to the Steelers. Like, we're running out of winnable games very fast here. Like you can't just beat the Dolphins and the Patriots and make the playoffs. It's not how that works. And the
Yeah.
Titans, he beat them. It's like now we're looking at like 6 wins here because like you're in the AFC with Aaron Rodgers. The competition is a lot stiffer in the AFC, and Julian Edelman just like put it best. Like Tom Brady made it look easy when he was 40, and he did the league a disservice because now people think that's an easy thing to do. Where Tom Brady did that during COVID, Peyton Manning did that, but when Peyton Manning did it, it was two of the best defensive players in the league at the peak of their powers, and they kind of got the benefit of an easier matchup versus the Panthers with the banged up Cam Newton, and they didn't really have that many weapons on offense. So it was kind of the perfect matchup for the Broncos there. And Manning ends up getting it done, and Breeze did not have an arm after 40. Like the second half of the season, didn't have an arm there, so it's like I don't know with the Jets. I they're not. I just don't see them making the playoffs. Like you're not gonna beat a team like the Bengals, Steelers, Ravens to make the playoffs. I see you beating like the third and fourth team in the AFC, but like beating the Texans, maybe you can beat the Colts. But even then, like I don't know.
I don't have any faith in this Jets team. I just think that between the vibe in the locker room, you've already fired your head coach, and then your interim head coach, I'm not overly impressed with. I just think this team has been slapped together with duct tape and expecting for this ship to continue riding. But at some point, this team's going to implode, and I think it's imploding right now in front of us. Luckily, they faced the Patriots, but then they faced the Texans that very next week. It's like I don't see a lot of winnable games in their schedule now. Maybe the Dolphins, but Tua's coming back. Maybe that changes the Dolphins a little bit as well. Like I just think it's getting pretty ugly at this point, and I just don't know how things fare for the Jets or Aaron. This might be the last time we see Aaron Rodgers this season. This might be his final year potentially.
Yeah, yeah. Aaron Rodgers could just decide to say to hell with it and retire after the season. I'm not winning a Super Bowl with the Jets, and then hope people forget this part of his career because it's a very forgettable if he just retired now. I mean, like you know
Yeah,
what? No one would fault Aaron Rodgers. Like I messed up. I was like, I was always like, I never thought this marriage would work with him and the Jets. Like I was surprised that he even chose to go there over a team like the Broncos or someone else. Like it just never made sense.
don't you think that the Broncos would have made more sense looking back? I feel like he fits the culture of Denver a lot more than New York. New York was just it was just a marriage that was bound to fail, you know.
Yeah, he would have
But
had receivers there. Javante Williams, Nathaniel Hackett. Would that have worked out? Still,
no,
probably not. But
no. But maybe Sean Payton plays is still the head coach potentially. Well, let's talk about other bad teams while we're talking about the Jets. We'll stay in division. Let's talk about the Dolphins and Colts game. Tyler Huntley, he gets benched. Nick Boyle comes into the game. The 16-10 game that was for Anthony Richardson and the Dolphins. Just two ugly games, two ugly teams. Thoughts on this game? Woof, man. That's my thought on this game. Not a whole lot I want to talk
yeah,
about.
Anthony Richardson turning into the Black Daniel Jones. Like, ugh, my God. That is a Daniel Jones stat line if I've ever seen it. Like 10 for 24, 129 yards, and it just looks hard for him to complete passes at this point where Joe Flacco has proven this is doable, and it's tough for him and the Colts without Jonathan Taylor here. You don't have Zach Moss to lean on this season. He went out there, proved himself, got his money with the Bengals, so that definitely made sense for him. But like now, when Anthony Richardson is in, Michael Pittman gets worse, Josh Downs disappears, Alec Pierce disappears, and it's because he's not completing open throws here. So it's like it's not Shane Steichen's fault. Anthony Richardson's just at a point in his career. It's like we need to see more volumes of yardage at like being picked up passing the ball. Like stop looking to run. And I feel like 14 attempts for 50, 60 rushing yards. Are you kidding me? Like no. You have plenty of talent on your offense. Stop looking to run the ball. Like you don't need that. The Colts don't need that. You just had a hip injury and you just came back. What are we doing?
Yeah. And honestly, as a passer, like last year, he wasn't excellent. He had a short window of time, but 60% of his passes, he made some big throws, and I liked what I saw from him, especially because what he could do on the ground. But this year, when you're completing less than 50% on the year, and you have 7 interceptions to 3 touchdowns, and it just feels like he's on that run first grind, almost, I mean, completely to his fault at this point. I just it's tough to watch. He also has more fumbles and he's a lot more clumsy with the ball too. Like I don't know. I think especially with what we saw with Joe Flacco, I feel like in this sense like sit him, let Joe Flacco play this season, especially with where they are in the playoff standings. Let Joe Flacco play and then let Anthony Richardson come in after he sat a little bit because he always was a raw prospect and throwing him into the weeds was never really a great idea. But at least then you can maybe salvage his development a little bit and where you see Joe Flacco, you let him play, and then let Anthony Richardson play next year after he's polished as a passer. Or better yet, if it fails, go out and get a new quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Watching this game was literally like listening to G Easy. It's like, why is G Easy? Why does this exist? Why are you? Who planted you in the industry at this point? So we were talking about you're looking at shows in Arizona. I was looking at shows the other day. We was both like, G Easy, and it was like, why is he touring again? Why is he relevant again? No one asked for him to come back. We were fine when he went away. Like, no one wanted him here. Just like
No,
this game. Like the Dolphins, terrible game from them. Nothing to even talk about there. And then the Colts with Anthony Richardson. It's just like, what is happening? What is going on?
yeah, two things. Like, neither team I was excited to see play. And it's just like anytime I see a G Easy record, it's like, I'm not listening to this. And then with this game, I'm like, I'm not watching this game. I'm going to go listen to something or watch something better. And that's kind of the analogy with G Easy and with this game. I feel like they both go hand in hand. They both suck. They both are not good at their respected profession. And you will not see me go back and watch this game, nor will you see me watch and listen to a G Easy album. So this was the G Easy game. I guess you can say is what that was.
Yeah, it was for sure. I mean, why would you listen to G Easy when there's so many better artists to listen to? Like go back to the 90s and listen to someone you haven't heard before. Like
Or even if you're a frat rapper like listener, he's not even good in that profession. I feel
no,
like you could put maybe jump like clump Jack Harlow in there. I feel like Jack Harlow is better than G Easy all day long.
for
A lot more
sure.
fun too.
Yeah, and he doesn't take himself so. I felt like G Easy took himself really seriously when he first came out, where he's like, "Me, myself, and I." I was like, "Oh
Which is a horrible song by
yeah,
the way.
it's just me, myself, and I." It's like he tried to be like super edgy, but then he had like I don't, he had like the magician haircut.
He looks like making music.
Yeah,
He looks like he should be selling me a beat up Honda Civic. Speaking of a team that is not good at their respected profession, just like G Easy, the Dolphins, and the Colts, let's talk about the Panthers because it's been a while since I beat up on the Panthers. The Commanders, Jaden Daniels gets hurt almost immediately, and in comes Marcus Mariota, and he does what backups do when they fill in. They ball naturally. Marcus Mariota, 132 QBR, absolutely obliterates this pathetic Panthers offense. And Andy Dalton, I mean, good God, 11 of 16, 93 yards, 2 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. He was so bad that the Panthers were like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's put Bryce Young back in the game. He surely will be better. And what did he do? He threw backwards. He threw 2 passes for -4 yards. They're like, oh, maybe we put Andy Dalton back in next game. Maybe we were a little too crazy there. But they were so desperate and such a low point where Chuba Hubbard didn't do too much on the ground. Xavier Legette couldn't even get open. Andy Dalton couldn't even crack 100 yards passing. Bryce Young, he said, hold my beer. Don't worry. We're going backwards in time. No, no, Bryce Young. We're moving forward into the end zone. Bryce Young still needs some work, of course.
yeah, no. This no, literally in 20 years, there's gonna be like a Schoolhouse Rock VHS tape produced about how to remember your Panthers quarterbacks because there is no fixing this team. It's like, how do you remember 45 quarterbacks in the past 20 years for this Panthers team? I don't know. Why don't we call up Schoolhouse Rock? I'm sure they'll have some good ideas. They taught us the alphabet and literature and math when we were younger. But, and I mean, you get carved up by Marcus Mariota. What more is there to say? And this was like the biggest beatdown of the season, I feel like, for the Carolina Panthers. This is the worst that they've looked by far. So bad that Andy Dalton got in an actual car wreck after the game.
Oh damn. Well,
Yeah,
hopefully he's doing okay. What hurt
I
me
hope
about this
so.
game? What hurt me about this game was like Bryce Young had a 300-yard season at this point, not 300-yard game, 300-yard season, and now after the passes that he made in this game, now he's back below 300. And if he sees the field again, I hope he can is able to accumulate that. But right now he's on pace to. Right now he's at 299 passing yards. Next game maybe we'll be closer to 290. I just really hope that he can begin moving forward the football again because so far this season he has not been able to do so. And in the short sighting that we saw of him, no pun intended with his height, he's moving backwards, and that's unfortunate to see.
Yeah, he is moving backwards. So we'll see what happens there. The Commanders did exactly what they needed to do. Hopefully, Jaden Daniels is okay. He gave the thumbs up, was pretty happy, and they really just didn't see a reason to put him back into the game there because Marcus Mariota was absolutely tearing it up and probably played the best football game of his life here. So good for the Commanders. Now we know that it's not just Jaden Daniels who is elevating this franchise. This is a competent, well-run team at this point where you can plug in someone like Marcus Mariota and have a dominant 40-7 performance. So I think that does speak a little bit to the culture that Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn are building there in Washington, that they're able to do that.
Yeah, they fill in, and Marcus Mariota balls, so I think that's good evidence there. Organization that is not doing that necessarily, plugging in these guys. How about the Raiders? Last game to talk about LA versus Las Vegas. We had Aiden O'Connell start. He hurt his little fingy. He was out for the rest of the game. In comes the mustache himself, Gardner Minshew. It wasn't pretty. Three interceptions, below 50% completion rating. Alexander Matson did the best he could, but Raiders, they fall yet again. And the Rams cut out a gritty win. Now they're 2-4, starting to get healthy again. Any, literally anything to comment on this game other than the Raiders being a mess.
Yeah, I looked at this game and I was like, wow, the Raiders are probably going to lose. And the Rams won. And then I look back and I see this game and it plays out. And I'm like, the Raiders lost and the Rams won. And that game is now in the history books and was played here. What we did see, though, is that Tom Brady is now a part owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, which is the most interesting thing to talk about in the Raiders. And then did you see the crazy requirements that he now has as a broadcaster? Where now he
Yeah.
leverages, signs the biggest broadcasting deal in history, leverages that after taking a pay cut throughout his career to now buy a percentage of the Raiders. And now Tom Brady is going to pick out the next quarterback for the Raiders, and that's his job. So the Raiders, Shador Sanders, is it a marriage made in heaven? That is now the
God,
storyline with Tom Brady being their new part owner.
he wins in both ways. First of all, he is the richest broadcaster of all time. He signed what, $400 million for 10 years? And all the things you need to do as a broadcaster, like doing those meetings and meeting with the players and coaches, he can't do at this point. This is literally like he's clocking into work and then he's just sitting on the pallet while everyone stocks the shelves. It's a great way to put it. And then not only that, it's like he owns the store, but as a part-time grocery clerk. And as the part-time grocery clerk, he just watches everyone else do his job while he sits there and just clocks in, makes the money, makes more money than all of them actually. And he continued, yeah, he's going to be a part owner of the Raiders, which is obviously a great business venture there. And he's still making a shit ton of money as a broadcaster. So he found a way to basically quiet quit as a broadcaster, just basically just go in, clock in, call a game, and then still make money as a Raiders owner. So genius move by Brady. He's winning on both ends.
40 chess on and off the field and, at work. I mean, when you can make a deal with your work that you don't actually have to work, absolutely crazy with Tom Brady doing the most while doing the least. Absolutely love to see it with Tom Brady there. But yeah, nothing to talk about with the game, but congrats to Tom Brady. Congratulations to the Raiders that he's now a part owner of the team. So we'll see if he gets into more ownership like LeBron did with the Red Sox. But being a part owner of an NFL team, pretty big, and maybe that sets him up to one day buy the Raiders from Mark Davis because he is one of the poorest owners in the NFL. So hopefully we can see the Raiders start to spend some money here. Someone else who doesn't want to make some moves, doesn't want to spend some money here. Um, one of the older owners in the league, Jerry Jones. Cowboys fans do not like him. I was at the Dallas Rodeo, and nothing good to say about Jerry Jones. The rodeo clown was making Jerry Jones jokes the entire time. He literally started out, he was like, the fair gave me some smart TVs to give away to some people in the crowd, and I went there and searched the biggest loser, and a bunch of Dallas Cowboys games popped up here. And he was one of those crazy people that still thinks Dak Prescott is his quarterback, but every Cowboys fan I've talked to does not like Jerry Jones, and full on Jerry came out again this week where they're not making any moves at the trade deadline. He is not going to fire Mike McCarthy. That's off the table. It's like, what is happening right now? It's just like he turned the stove on and walked away. It's like, I know my house is burning down, but why would I call the fire department to put it out? That doesn't make any sense. Let me just put a frozen turkey in the deep fryer and see what happens.
I'm not surprised that the Cowboys fans hate Jerry Jones. He's a very hateable man. But yeah, not doing any moves when your team is about to lose to the 49ers because you guys can't beat the 49ers the last 30 years. The 49ers literally own you. But yeah, like every single week, we get a couple of things in the NFL. We get people saying that Patrick Mahomes is washed because he throws more picks. We have the Will Levis memes that keep rotating around the NFL. And we have Jerry Jones being senile. It's awesome. We see it every week. You get a little bit of everything. You get um, cognitive decline, you get memes, and you get haters in the comments as well. So for the Cowboys, them not making a move is completely ludicrous when CeeDee Lamb has not played quite to his standard. Their running game is dog shit, and their defense sucks as well. Um, I guess, watching the Cowboys decline, we're seeing it in real time, but we predicted it. We called it. So it's great to see.
Yeah, I thought they'd have a losing record this year. People thought that was crazy, but like, is it crazy? Was it really that
No,
crazy?
no, it was not.
But
But
yeah, other news like also with the Raiders, Aiden Hutchinson's goes down. Max Crosby talking about the Raiders, and he's like, I don't know about you guys, but I'm here to win. And then we're finally starting to see that frustration where we've seen guys like Dame be like, I'm here to win. This is the team I want to be with, and I want to win with this Las Vegas Raiders team. But he's like, I'm not here to do whatever this is. And now we're starting to see, like, maybe Max Crosby is starting to look elsewhere and could potentially be on the move, or do you think he's just frustrated, but he'll still stay with the Raiders inevitably here?
I think he's a loyal guy, but I think the Raiders could also benefit from trading him. You think about a team like the Lions, who maybe don't need their first round pick next year as much as they already are a complete team. I think him going to Detroit after you lose Hutchinson, he fills in for him perfectly, and is arguably better than Aiden Hutchinson to some extent. He fills in. You also get a first round pick from Detroit. You now have two first round picks. So if you don't have the first overall pick, you can then at least package it for the number one overall pick. I feel like at this point, just trade Max Crosby. He deserves to be in a winning culture. Whether it's a team like the Lions or any other team that's in need of an edge rusher, go out and get him. They have the capital for it. They could use some assets. I think they should do that, especially if you're going to trade Devontae. What else do you have as assets at this point? Nobody cares about Jacoby Myers. You're not trading Brock Bowers. Go out and trade Max Crosby. Get some value for him.
Yeah, and I think that would be a great trade for both teams. But yeah, it's pretty much everything this week except for what you all look forward to on a weekly basis. The reason why some of you have a phone, we have the top five worst teams according to the Brickyard. So many of these documents we've opened today and the past few years have come true. Even my Jay Cutler, Kyler Murray analogy coming all the way around full circle, but we officially have the 5 worst teams, and some teams take it as a moment of pride where they step off and get off this list, and then some teams are pinned here forever and cannot leave. So, who this week, according to the Brickyard, are the 5 worst teams out of week 7?
So here are the worst teams according to the Brickyard. There is a couple of teams that I must mention will not be on this list for various reasons. One team that I will spare this week, the New Orleans Substitutes. Backup QB, backup running back, back off offensive line, wide receivers, tight ends, defensive players, you name it. Hell, they probably have backup jock straps at this point. I'll leave them off the list this week. They are falling apart, quite literally. The Jags won at home in London. I'll leave them off this list this week simply because they won a football game. I can't hate them for winning. Cowboys, I'm going to leave them off the sleep simply because the bye week was here and I forgot how pathetic they are. Bye week did have some hands. We saw Jerry Jones in the news this week, but overall they will not be on this list. Nor will we see the Cleveland Browns, because what did I tell you guys when we did the worst top 5 last week? I said we will not see the Browns on this list as soon as they bench Deshaun Watson or Jameis Winston is starting at quarterback. Well, guess what? We just had the BIOT. That's right. We had the best injury of all time. Deshaun Watson is hurt. Unfortunate circumstances for his Achilles, but not unfortunate for his arousal periods with the massage therapist. He will be back on the massage parlor, and the Browns will have Jameis Winston. So therefore, they are exonerated. There's hope and optimism in Cleveland for some reason, so we'll give the Browns a pass this list. I also want to give a dishonorable mention to the Tennessee Titans. You subbed out Will Levis. He had an injury. You got the same thing, but with no memes. Mason Rudolph had 3 fumbles and an interception. All the bad play, but without the memes. Hashtag bring back Mayo. Which leads me to my number 5 pick, the Patriots. Hashtag no more Mayo. You want to call your team soft? Isn't that your fault? You had the greatest head coach last year, and that team was by no means soft. That was a tough out, despite them being as bad as they were. But when you have as many rushing yards as a guy named D'Ernest on the other team, you're not going to win many football games. And at this point, if you don't get a receiver for Drake May, this man's going to die on the field, quite literally, with how bad that offensive line is. Next, I have another team in that division. Yes, of course, I'm talking about the New York Jets. If you told me that you have a Hall of Fame quarterback, Pro Bowl running back, Hall of Fame wide receiver, alongside a Pro Bowl wide receiver, a solid tight end, and a top 5 defense, and that you're 2-5, I would say you're the New York Jets. Because that's exactly what I expected here. Aaron Rodgers has fallen off a cliff. Breece Hall gets stuffed. Couldn't do much on the ground this past game. Devontae Adams was nowhere to be seen whatsoever. 3 catches for 30 yards for a guy you traded a second-round pick for. Pathetic. The Jets, they find ways to disappoint. And like many other teams on this list, it's the heartbreak that kills me. I love seeing love in the world and not seeing heartbreak. But when you have a team like the Jets, it's nothing but heartbreak. But that's not nearly as pathetic as what we saw from the number 3 team here, which is the Carolina Panthers. I'm tired of talking about the Carolina Panthers. Andy Dalton was set to be your savior after Bryce Young was throwing backwards this past game. He was meant to be your savior. He gets benched. He throws for 93 yards. Bryce Young says, hold my beer. Let's throw behind you. Let's throw two for 2 for -4 yards. And he had a better QBR than Andy Dalton. That's right. If you throw backwards, you play better than quarterbacks in Carolina. Who knew? But I'm tired of talking about the Carolina Panthers because they are as pathetic as they are. So let's move to the number 2 team, the New York Giants. Yes, of course the New York Giants are on this list. Your old teammate, Saquon Barkley, a guy that you had not 1, not 2, but 3 chances to re-sign and he wanted to be a lifetime New York Giant for some reason in that great weather of New York State, or East Rutherford, New Jersey, more like. He ran all over you. 165 yards. Tough look for you. You benched Daniel Jones. Surprise, surprise. He had more on a single run than you had basically the entire game. And Daniel Jones, you pay $140 million for the guy. He hasn't thrown a touchdown in 2 years. You have hockey players outscoring him at MetLife the last 2 years. You have 20 quarterbacks, including Desmond Ridder, who is right now on the couch doing exactly what we're doing. He has thrown more touchdowns at MetLife since you last threw a touchdown at MetLife. But most importantly, I want to talk about the number one team. And for this team, this is a team that has nothing but heartbreak. You want to talk about a team that defines a cursed franchise? I'm talking about the LA Chargers. And the reason I want to talk about the LA Chargers, but I don't think I'm capable of talking about the LA Chargers. So I actually phoned in a friend, and I have a Chargers fan who's going to go and talk about how much heartbreak the Chargers have been. So why don't we take it away from him himself?
Oh God, here we go.
I don't think I could have said it better myself. The Chargers, they are the most disappointing team simply because of heartbreak. You want to see that guy continue to have that solemn look on his face that we've seen every
Yeah.
single week since he's been an NFL fan of the Chargers? It's heartbreak. I have love in my heart. So do you. And we're going to go over the top teams tomorrow on the show. But I'm just tired of seeing the Chargers break the hearts of their fans each and every week. So therefore, they are the worst team according to the Brickyard in week 7.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't hear anything from that video, but you can tell, even if you watch it without audio, just the pain on that man there. I mean, that person looked like he was someone who had just lost a loved one or found out that he had to get a new car battery. Like, he did not look like he was in a good place there. Like, he's driving around and then you just see that tire pressure light come on again. You're like, what is it this time? I drove over another nail. That's exactly what it feels like for the Chargers. It's like every other week you drive over a nail and have to get a tire patched or a new tire. It's like no one wants to be there. It's not necessarily something you did wrong. You can't control that their nails are out on the road.
His face. Unfortunately, I got to keep you on this list.
Yeah, that Cardinals loss was bad. Like this was a Cardinals team that looked lost the past few weeks too.
That was not win. And it's not like the
It's not like
Cardinals are world
Arizona's.
beaters.
Yeah, it's not like Arizona's some great home field advantage. Like,
No, that was the chance where they had the chance to have the majority, but they weren't. Those two teams, there were 60,000 fans there. I guarantee all of those fans were not of either team.
no, they're just people like someone gave them a ticket to go to that game because they couldn't make it.
Oh,
So
20
like, yeah, I
bucks?
guess I'll go.
20 bucks for tickets? Sure. I'll see the Cardinals, even though I'm a Raiders fan. I digress.
Yeah,
But that, we've been previewed. We recapped all of the games in week 7 in the NFL. We talked about the latest news. And best of all, we gave our worst top 5. So we now know who are the worst teams in the league, whether they're disappointing, whether they're heartbreaking, or whether they're just downright pathetic. We now know going into week 8 who was the worst of the worst.
yeah, we know the worst of the worst, and then tomorrow we'll be back to preview week 8 here, and then after that, you know what it means. We'll have Q2 review the week after, but the NBA season started today. Celtics woke up on a mission, and we will be previewing some of the NBA season, keeping up with what our expectations are for the year, covering a little bit about that Celtics next games because some wild things have been said, so you're not going to want to miss our NBA season preview, especially with everything happening in the NFL right now. Importantly, stay brick.